Greetings, Mar. Glad you could join us. Okay. Um, Anybody have any last minute questions, comments, or anything? Mar, how about you? You got anything? We don't hear or see you, but we know you're here.
Hi, sorry about that. I couldn't unmute for a second there.
It's okay.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started on the program, or?
I'm a Libra with Scorpio rising and a Taurus moon.
Oh, okay, dokie. How long you been in astrology?
Uh, Intermittently since 1975.
Ah, yeah, like most of us last century.
Right.
Sounds better that way. Sounds like we're really old pros. Okay, so let's get started. So we go. Oh, share screen. That's what I want to do. As soon as I figure out what I'm doing. Share. Start the slideshow. Yeah, here we go. Okay, everybody, welcome. Um, I'll try not to get into a coughing fit. I'm gonna probably not talk as much as I might normally, only because of that.
Hmm.
Um, February 11th, it's Black History Month and it's Valentine's Day. So happy Valentine's Day to everybody. Um, Spencer, there's Spencer's emails. Here's me, Jimmy Eddy. There's my email, Jimmy_Eddie. And as I had mentioned, if you want a copy of the slideshow, drop me an email at Jimmy_Eddy@hotmail.com and I will send it to you. So basic agenda. Well, we've done our talk around. Anybody have any other announcements they want to make? Quick look at the calendar of upcoming astrological events. Then we're going to get into Black History Month. Talk about St. Valentine Day probably a little bit. We've got charts. Um, Katharina is going to give us an interesting look at Fani Willis, the prosecutor from Fulton County, Georgia. Uh, we've got the charts of Martin Luther King Jr. and his family. Summary Q&A, a bit about the 24 schedule, and then there's also charts for Thurgood Marshall, um, first Black Justice of the Supreme Court.
Hmm.
Um, and then at the end, I've thrown in slides for the Spears family, Britney, her parents, and her sister, Jamie, and they're as part of the dysfunctional families. If you want to just take a look at them and see see if you can figure out where the dysfunction might come from. To some extent, we'll be talking about handling charts where you don't have a birth time, because for most of these people, we do not have birth times. Okay, so here's what's coming up. Tomorrow, Mars is going to go void a course, and then he will enter Aquarius. Then on Tuesday, he will conjunct Pluto. Um, think back to February 5th when Mercury conjuncted Pluto. Um, so we have Mars conjuncting. Venus is going to be moving into Aquarius soon as well, and will also conjunct Pluto. So you've got those three personal planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, all moving into Aquarius and conjuncting Pluto within about a 2-week period. So look for any common themes and what's going on in your life around that time. Okay, happy Valentine's Day. Venus will go void of course. The moon will start the day out making 3 crisis of action or first quarter squares, first to Venus, then to Pluto, and then to Mars, all before 9 a.m. in the morning. So uh, could be an interesting Valentine's Day for some people. It could be a day for getting things done because there's a lot of that first quarter do stuff energy. Um, on the 16th, there will be 6 exact major aspects, and Venus will enter Aquarius. So she's going to be void of course from Valentine's Day to the 16th. So it's not a good time to start a new relationship. And the moon will be making 3 waxing air trines on the 16th as part of those 6 major aspects. First to Venus, then to Pluto, and then to Mars, all between noon and 5 p.m. in the afternoon. On the 17th, Venus will conjunct Pluto. On the 18th, Mercury will go void of course. The Sun will enter Pisces. Then on the 21st, Venus will conjunct Mars at 6 Aquarius 58. On the 22nd, Moon returns inbounds, and Mercury will enter Pisces. Then let's see, on the 24th, we have the full moon opposite the Sun, 5 Virgo 23. On the 27th, Mars will make a waning square to Jupiter. One of the interesting things about 24 is that as Mars makes its, particularly with the Mars transit, it's going to be making significant major aspects to Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and Chiron is the North Node as well.
Could I
So
mention something here, Jim?
yeah,
On the 21st, when Venus conjuncts Mars at 6 Aquarius,
Yeah.
that's going to be opposite Trump's Pluto in the 12th house.
oh, how about that? Could be interesting.
Yes.
That's on the 21st? On the 21st, you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
21st.
Mm.
So they will be, at 6 Aquarius, his Pluto's at 10, so it's going to be approaching his Pluto.
Yeah. So the other thing to keep in mind too is that you got Mars will, as it transits through Aquarius, will also be opposing his Pluto, and then will also be opposing his Mars because he's got Mars in Leo too, doesn't he? If I remember correctly.
Well, on the day of the last day of the Republican convention, he's going to have Uranus square Mars and Mars square his ascendant.
It could be an interesting summer.
Yes,
Very
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, so it makes the waning or closing square to Jupiter on the 27th. On the 28th, we have the Sun Mercury superior conjunction at 9 Pisces 15. Superior conjunction is when Mercury is directed on the far side of the Sun. Then we have, let's see, Mercury will then conjunct Saturn, and then the Sun will conjunct Saturn all on the 28th. So 28th could be kind of a busy day as well. On the 29th, there will be 6 exact major aspects. March gets off to a relatively quiet start, but then on the 3rd, there will be 6 exact major aspects. On March 8th, Mercury will conjunct Neptune, 27 Pisces. Then on the 9th, Mars will make a waning square to Uranus. And then on the 10th, we have our meetup. We'll be talking about eclipses and intercepted signs and maybe a couple of other things. There'll also be 6 exact major aspects on the 10th. And we will have one of which will be the super new moon at 20 Pisces 17. Any questions?
Spencer. Yeah, I just wanted to add that February 14th, with all these weird things going on, Juno is going to be, well, Juno is retrograde. So yeah, Valentine's Day is going to be pretty interesting.
Yes. It usually is. Okay. Where do we go from here? What's next? Okay, here's a little background on Black History Month. Something we haven't actually talked about in the past. So the story of Black History Month actually begins in 1915. about a half century after the 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the United States. In that September, the Harvard-trained historian Carter G. Woodson and prominent minister Jesse Moreland founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History,
No, they're
an
not talking.
organization that was dedicated to research and promoting achievements by Black Americans and other people of African descent. Known today as the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, the group sponsored National Negro History Week in 1926, choosing the second week of February to coincide with the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. That event inspired schools and communities nationwide to begin organizing local celebrations. The decades that followed, mayors of cities across the country began issuing yearly proclamations recognizing Negro History Week. By the late 60s, thanks in part to the Civil Rights Movement and the growing awareness of Black identity, Negro History Week had evolved into Black History Month on many college campuses. Now, President Gerald Ford officially recognized Black History Month in 1976, calling upon the public to seize the opportunity to honor the too often neglected accomplishments of Black Americans in every area of endeavor throughout our history. Hi, Barbara. Welcome. Okay, St. Valentine's Day. Well, that's St. Valentine it's actually St. Valentine's Feast Day, it's the full title of it, but like everything else, it's been co-opted by commercialism and is now just Valentine's Day. But St. Valentine was a 3rd century Roman saint, commemorated in Western Christianity on February 14th and in Eastern Orthodoxy on July 6th. From the High Middle Ages, his saint's day has been associated with a tradition of courtly love. He's also a patron saint of the island of Lesbos, the city of Terni, Italy, epilepsy, and beekeepers. Saint Valentine was a clergyman, either a priest or bishop in the Roman Empire, who ministered to persecuted Christians. He was martyred and his body was buried on the Via Flaminia on February 14th, which has been observed as the feast of Saint Valentine Day since at least the 8th century. Okay. Yada, yada, bing, bing. Okay. Now here's some things that we don't really talk about all that often, I guess, but probably should talk about a little more than we. That's rulerships. I mean, basically, one of the things that people learn when they start learning astrology is that Mars rules Aries, Venus rules Taurus, and so on. The planetary rulerships of the signs, but not all of the subtleties of rulerships. And what I would call the Bible of rulerships is the book called The Book of Rulership by Rex E. Bills. I have an older copy and it's extremely well organized. And basically what it does is it just lists all the things that fall under the different rulerships. And it's great because of the way it's organized. It has an alphabetical section, so you could look something up alphabetically. And it'll then tell you, which planet, sign, house is involved in the rulership. But then it also will give you a listing by planets, by signs, and by houses. So if you want to see what all falls under the 7th house, for example, you could go to the 7th house section. Or if you want to know what Jupiter rules, you could look at under Jupiter. And if you want to know what falls under Gemini, you look in the Gemini section. So since we're going to be talking about lawyers and law and ministers and preachers and such, I thought I would throw some of this in here. Lawyers and the law basically ruled by Jupiter, 9th house of Sagittarius, Mercury, and in some cases Libra, Mars, and Uranus. So 7th house Libra, it's basically legal matters that we sometimes have to deal with. Ministers, preachers, churches, interesting. That's also 9th house. It's also Jupiter and it's also Sagittarius. So, but Saturn is also involved with rulership involving churches, and bishops and cardinals come under Jupiter. Popes come under Saturn and Jupiter. And then I threw in a couple of others because, well, we're going to be talking about grandparents a little bit. So you have and this is where it can get a little tricky with astrology and rulerships. So the grandfather of a man and the grandmother of a woman fall in the seventh house. And the grandfather of a woman and the grandmother of a man are under the first house. That's where you'd look to find them.
The other thing I've noticed is that quite often when you have a planet close to the ascendant, or in the first house close to the ascendant, it's rules the house of someone you identify with in your family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I
That's
suppose
an
this
interesting.
is, I suppose this is obvious, but the lawyers in the law fall under Libra, which is the scales, the balancing things out.
That's because
Yeah.
I can see both sides of a question.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, this, or fairness or whatever. Yeah. Interesting.
they should.
Yeah, they should. Or try anyway.
Yeah. Oh, good yet. Okay. So moving on. Here we go. So Fani Willis, born in Inglewood, father John C. Floyd III was founder of a faction of the Black Panthers, but grew disillusioned by the movement's infighting. And Katarina, are you there?
Yes, and I'm going to pronounce her name Fani, and I'm glad to, jump in.
So you want to take over?
Sure. Can you not show the chart yet? And
Yeah.
because I want to do a little more interactive with everybody. So if you have your notebook and a piece of paper or pen and pencil handy, what I really wanted to do was, before we look at her chart, definitely let's talk about all of the things that are happening in her life and with her facts about her world and some of her history. And I have some other ideas to present. And before you look at her chart, so you can start to predict what her chart is going to be like, what planets are activated, what signs, what are the cycles. Do you want to read this, or do you want me to, Jim?
You can go ahead if you like, if you're ready. We just lost your audio.
Is my audio okay now? We're good
There
now?
you go.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, we got the video and audio. Yeah. So if everybody has their pen and paper ready, I like that you have this Willis, which is actually her first husband's surname. So Willis is not her birth name or her, father's name. Her father's last name is Floyd. And where do we know the name Floyd? You may have heard that recently, George Floyd, during the Black Lives Matter movement. And so this harkens back to her father. Fani was her father, John C. Floyd, was a founder of the faction of Black Panthers, but grew disillusioned by the movement's infighting. And she says in this research that I did, her name is actually Fani. Fani is Swahili. Taifa is her middle name. And the last name is Willis through her first husband, which she has since divorced. Fani is a Black Panther. He was very Afrocentric. Her name is Swahili. Fani actually means prosperous, and Taifa means people. So her name really means, in Swahili, prosperous people. So this is really important because we're not looking just at her father and the Black Panthers movement, but we're looking at the huge history of African American lineage that comes from Africa, specifically Swahili. So this is really important when we're looking at families. We're not talking about the material things and wealth. We're talking about the stuff that really matters. I always remember my roots, that I come from a prosperous people, which are African people, which is beautiful. So Fani studied political science at Howard University, graduating cum laude in 1993, and then moved to Atlanta to attend Emory University Law School, graduating in 96. Before we move forward, I want to say a few facts about what the Black Panther movement is and was, because we might not know about it. And I have just a very quick list. This is what I want you to make notes about. So what is the Black Panther Party? It was an organization that was really, her father was part of it. And so she grew up with their philosophy and their vision. And it was founded in Oakland, 1966, and it went through 1982. So that's during her childhood. And there were 10 precepts, like, you know how there are 10 laws in various religions? Please make a note of a couple of these keywords, and they're going to give you the dead giveaway for her planets, aspects, and signs. Number 1, we want freedom. We want power to determine our destiny in the Black community. 2, we want full employment for our people. 3, we want an end to the robbery of capitalists and our Black community. 4, we want decent housing fit for shelter of human beings. 5, we want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want education that teaches us our true history and our role in present day society. 6, everybody making notes? We want all Black men to be exempt from military service. This is really key because it's during the Vietnam War that this kicks off. 7, we want an immediate end to police brutality and murder for all Black people. And all of these issues are happening in the 60s. They're happening recently with the Pluto Uranus cycles that Richard Tarnas talks about, that I know we're all tracking. Number 8, we want freedom for all Black men held in federal, state, county, and city prisons and jails. So total liberty. 9, we want all Black people, when brought to trial, to be tried in a court by a jury of their peer group or people from their Black communities. So trial by community members, not trial of Blacks by whites, as defined by the Constitution of the United States. 10, we want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. And number 10 is really beautiful because at that point, what we are seeing the beginnings of what are a lot of our social services for free lunch programs, for after school programs, better education, social services. And we're seeing a tremendous movement forward socially out of the Black Panthers movement. So I understand this is so important. Let's see. I always remember from our roots, we come from a prosperous people. So she's getting the culture to remember their ancestral vision. Okay, so before we get to the political science part at Howard University, there's a huge chapter. She's born in Inglewood, California. Her mother and father raise her. Her father, John C. Floyd III, becomes disillusioned with the Black Panther Party infighting and moves to Washington, D.C. to practice law in Washington, D.C., the capital. So this is informative. Eventually, the mother and father split. Fani stays with her father in Washington, D.C. The mother and father separate from one another, divorce. She grows up practicing research, law research, legal research as an apprentice under her father as a child and teenager. So this is really important. Then she goes on to study political science at Howard University, graduating cum laude in 93, moved to Atlanta, attends Emory University Law School. In 2020, Willis is elected. Fani, I like to call her Willis. She actually has a new boyfriend now. Fani was elected district attorney for Fulton County, defeating Paul Howard, 6-term incumbent. And in this role, she's known for successfully using Georgia's RICO statute to prosecute non-mobsters. As of 2023, using the same statute to prosecute former President Donald Trump and 18 alleged co-conspirators. Jim, what's your next slide?
Her chart.
Oh, okay. Before we get to her chart, let me just tap. Hello. Before we go to her chart, I just want to chime in with a couple of those. The other issue is she's really the first African-American woman. There are many. It's interesting that we're talking about her and then you're going to go back to Martin Luther King, but she's definitely part of that lineage. So we could tie her chart to theirs. And she's part of this long cycle of the Pluto-Uranus conjunction squares oppositions about human justice in the United States that we're seeing and over the globe. And so that's an important tie-in. So with that being said, I'm curious what chart you have for her. And then
Okay,
we can talk about it.
yeah, I want to throw in one other thing because you had mentioned Pluto Uranus and how the
Yeah.
Panthers were formed in the 60s. And
Yeah.
with 65, 66 is when we had the Pluto Uranus conjunction.
Yep.
So this is all part of that whole cycle, bringing everything to the forefront. And it's continued on and gets reemphasized every time there's an aspect or a significant aspect between Pluto and Uranus. Okay.
Yeah, I'm curious what chart you drafted up.
Well, there you go. This is her natal chart.
Okay, cool. So what I
I
wanted to go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I had all the points that you had mentioned in your email and
Yeah.
the aspects. So I've got quintiles in here.
Okay, yeah,
someone-
I think you use a small orb for quintiles, and I have another chart. But as we look at her chart right now, and in comparison to her life trajectory, understand that she's born as a long cycle of justice workers. Her father, the Black Panthers, Martin Luther King's lineage, but many before her that have Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Nat Turner. There's this huge lineage of people that are tied into it. So it's not just the biology of the bio family, but a huge lineage of American history. And it's what you see that stands out that is significant. And I sent Jim the notes on this is the patterns that are activated, two grand trines, essentially a Star of David. And I'm going to talk from the chart that I have drafted up because I want to make sure things are included. There's essentially a Star of David and two, which is a configuration of two grand trines. If you've used smaller orbs, they're not going to activate, but we see that we don't have a birth time for her, first and foremost. So so you've just used a noon time. I would almost change that just because we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get her birthday. So please do not use that axis, ascendant, descendant, midheaven, etc., when we're looking at her chart. But we have enough facts about her life that we could do a chart. Was this a chart rectification of hers, Jim?
Yeah,
No,
we
just
probably
yes.
could. We could try that. I
But I
didn't
mean,
follow it.
yeah, I mean, we could do it as we're talking because we have
Yeah.
enough life events for her. It's really
Mm.
that's a whole nother thing. But I just want to take a look at the aspects. We have and the patterns. We have a Star of David, two grand trines, one in air, another in fire. So that's inspiration and intellect, communication. We have just looking at those patterns. We have a mystic rectangle, and I'll just name those points. 10 degrees of the moon conjunct the north node, 10 degrees Chiron in Aries conjunct Eris. She's overturns the tables and it's conjoined her Chiron. Remember, Chiron is not just the wounded healer. It is the symbol of the individual where in our chart that we have been abandoned. Remember, Chiron, like Moses, is abandoned by the fathers or the patriarchy in this case. So we see the direct tie-in with Chiron and Eris. Eris is the one that challenges authority. Remember, she does not start a war. Remember, this is a tale and a retelling of a tale. Eris challenges the authority. What woman starts a war in human history? Very few. Just do your statistics on that. So part of this mystic rectangle is the moon. The moon in traditional astrology is the people. Conjunct Vesta is very close. Conjunct the North Node, her vision. Vesta, the home and hearth. We see those issues about the home and hearth. Vesta nearing to conjunction with the moon. In the Black Panther manifesto, home, family, protection, safety, safety for the people, food for children, safety from prison, and then forming that sextile to Chiron and Eris. Even if we're not looking at the signs and just looking at the aspects, it's tremendously significant. Eris and Chiron in Aries, the sign of the ram, the initiator. Aquarius, the sign of the worker, ruled by Saturn in traditional astrology. Aquarius is ruled by Saturn in traditional astrology. It's the water bearer, it's the worker, the individual of the culture that gets things done, the laborer, the people. She's advocating for the people. If we continue that, looking at that pattern of the mystic rectangle, we then move on to South Node and Ceres in Leo. Ceres is the goddess asteroid that rules cereals, food, grain, food programs, food for all. Literally the manifesto that she was raised under asks for bread. Literally in the manifesto. It's chilling, it's so accurate. Then to complete this amazing mystic rectangle, we have Uranus at 15 degrees of Libra. Uranus, the planet of revolution, electricity, sudden shocks. So all of these things are happening at this moment with this Donald Trump RICO case in Georgia. Let's look at the Star of David. And we can see, are you making these connections, everyone, with this Black Panther manifesto and how this is embodied in her chart? In Libra, not just the scales of justice, but it is the first cardinal sign of autumn, and it cuts like a blade. It's the only inanimate object and machine of the zodiac. Everything else is a crab, a lion, a maiden, a twin. It's the only machine of the zodiac. If we look at that Star of David, or the two, remember there's a lot of tremendous air and fire in the chart. That's the Star of David. Jupiter conjunct Neptune, vision. Jupiter rules law and expansion in Sagittarius, the sign of law, legal degrees. Opposing Pallas Athena and Saturn. So Pallas Athena comes to conjoin Saturn in her chart. So the perception that she is the authority, Pallas Athena is the warrior goddess that rules art and the arts of war. It's partnering with Saturn. She's had to partner with authority and law in the same way that her father did. So we're seeing the father as Saturn in her chart, to work with the constraints of the legal system of the United States to change the tides of history, not just for her people, well, not just for her family, herself, her community in Georgia, but really for the whole nation. Tremendous. And that's part of that. She has so many aspects in her chart, it's almost overwhelming. There's also the Jupiter, Neptune, trine, Eris, Chiron, trine, South Node, Ceres. So I discussed some of those pieces. There's also the triangle, Grand Trine, Moon, Vesta Moon, North Node, trining Pallas Athena, Saturn, unbelievable, trining Pluto. And not far away from it is Juno. Juno is the mother goddess Hera that's often married and has children, but the husband is a player and leaves. And that's part of her story as well. She's had children and has divorced. Conjunct Pluto, the power of authority at 0 degrees of Libra. Pluto, tremendous power and transformation that is not easy. So we're seeing that in her chart. We're also seeing that makes 6 oppositions. So the Neptune Jupiter opposition, and I'm going to mute folks. So Thanks. So we're seeing a lot of really interesting aspects in her chart that describe the conditions of her work, her life, her ancestry. There's also, if you're running quintiles, there's a quintile between, biquintile, that's a 72-degree aspect, so 72 and 72. What is that, Jim? 135. Mars to Pluto. She's got an active war aspect happening in her chart. Sedna, quintile Juno. Chiron and Eris, quintile, biquintile Mars. So the quintile is a fifth harmonic aspect, and biquintile that relates to Venus, but Venus is not just beauty and money, love and money. She's also, in the ancient world, a serious power player that rules law and the arts and battle. Venus as a morning star is not, it's the sign of war and action, the feminine taking active engagement. And Jim, do you want to jump in, or with folks with questions or comments? Jim, you're on the mute.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I know you keep saying you see a Star of David, but it's funny to me, I see a pentagram.
Well, actually, Jim, can I do a quick screen share?
Sure.
Great. Let me
Let me stop.
minimize. Yeah.
I'll
Let
stop.
me
You
minimize.
put up your chart.
Yeah. I just want to show you a different one. It's got some different colors, and I can highlight that. And it's a little bit bigger, so hopefully, let me go to screen share. One moment, please.
I mean, they're both
There's-
powerful symbols.
Yeah. Okay, let me open that up.
Okay,
Okay,
now I
sorry.
see a Star of David.
Yeah, now you see it. Exactly. Now you see it, now you don't. Yeah, so different, so there's slightly wider aspects. And I like this because of the colors. So this is the stellium I'm talking about in Aquarius. Can you see, all see that?
Mhm.
Vesta, home in the hearth. She's a woman that keeps the home fires burning. There's always a fire burning at the Temple of Vesta, but this is also something that's kept in the home and the hearth. The moon, the north node, her directional compass, Aquarius, the working people, the common man. Again, trining this Pallas Athena, Saturn, fascinating. And then trining that Pluto, Juno, that's one. And you could really count in a second kite here, again, connecting with Jupiter and Neptune, the dream. She's activating the dream of the people.
Yes, if you notice it, how the chart looks different, where Katerina is also using a noon birth time, you've got it set for 0 Aries on the ascendant, correct?
Yeah, I don't have it set for, I have it set for Inglewood, and I have her just light transits, but I have an Aries, so we're not looking at
A noon time chart.
we're not looking at houses, we're not looking at so it's Wednesday, Mercury's day, 27th of October, 1971. So she's having, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'll add something because as I was looking at her chart and thinking in terms of thinking about rectifying it, one of the things I would try would simply be to turn the chart so that you have Sagittarius in the 9th house.
Yep, there it is.
Sagittarius rules law. 9th house, Jupiter's in the ninth is in Sagittarius, the sign that rules. So she has an extremely powerful Jupiter.
Yes.
Now, looking at just the 10 planets, she has no planets in Earth signs.
Yes.
She's got 3 planets, and she's got 3 planets in water signs, and it's the Sun, Venus, and Mercury. So that's an incredibly powerful stellium there.
It's a monster. She is such a Goliath. it's so tremendous to see a woman, an African-American woman in American history. She's like a tremendous dragon with this fire and this air. I have to say, I know you wouldn't traditionally, like if we really wanted traditional, we'd only be looking at 7 planets, period. I
Yeah.
have thrown in a ton of aspects to goddess asteroids because of her life, her work, and her chart is active. You could read her life and then know all of Vesta and Pallas Athena and Ceres, and they're all activated. And I have to say, on the issue about earth signs, remember stunningly Sedna and Haumea, which we've discussed many, many times. Very briefly, Haumea, the Hawaiian indigenous goddess of being a transformer. It's quintile, or not quintile, quincunx rather, Eris and Chiron. It's an itchy, difficult aspect that's also seen as a kind of inconjunct. And it also, quincunx is the moon, the people. So it's a difficult issue, but Haumea represents a long cycles. And the feminine using power and magic and the ability to conjure. And in the West African tradition, you use conjure dance to change reality. You use words and singing and rhythm and language and power to change your path. And so this is significant. Sedna is also this 11,400-year orbiting body that represents indigenous women. Sedna is the name of her character. That is, she's tricked by the patriarchy and cut to pieces, which is exactly what we're seeing this week and this past few weeks, the patriarchy taking cuts at her.
Yeah.
In order to defile her name, insult her, make her disreputable. The patriarchy, meaning the difficulties of our American government, literally trying to throw her out of the boat, which is what happens in the Sedna story. So it's not an easy chart. So look at that Sedna. It's conjunct Juno, or quintile, biquintile Juno. There's a biquintile. Let me use my cursor to help people find that. I'm circling Sedna now. The biquintile to Pluto and Juno. Very difficult. Pluto, power, transformation, death. Sedna, death from the patriarchy. Sedna, quintiling Jupiter in Sagittarius. We haven't even discussed the transits.
Yeah. Adding something about the biquintile, the 144-degree aspect.
Oh, 144. Yes, thank you.
I personally think of it as being more Martian in nature, because Mars stations retrograde and stations direct when it's about 144 degrees from the sun.
Yeah, there are different opinions about it. A lot of people think of the quintile as Venusian. Rick Levine talks about this ad nauseum in almost every lecture that he gives. Quintile, he wouldn't do a chart without a quintile, that they are aspects of Venus. But as I said, Venus is not a powder puff. She is the goddess of war. She is the goddess of war. And if you look at not just Venus, it's Aphrodite, it's Inanna, you see it in Aztec. She goes out and creates safety, war for the sake of protection, which is what Haumea does as well. She tricks the authorities. And that's what Fani is doing.
The other thing too is that the 72-degree or quintile is part of the fifth harmonic, and the fifth harmonic represents shows one's talent. And you have two ways of looking at the talent. There's the Mars, because Mars is often strong in professional athletes, law enforcement, military types. But it's also the great talent of Venus in terms of areas of art, culture, and the like. So yeah, they both fall into that category.
I mean, we can touch very briefly on transits. I mean, Chiron, return,
Mhm.
North Node transiting her Chiron. Remember, this is the place where you've been abandoned. You have to, her mother left her with her father. She stayed as the apprentice of her father-in-law, exactly as Chiron had to apprentice with someone with excellence. So it's an exact story. Yeah. And then North Node transiting Aries, her vision, our vision as a culture, our vision of a free African-American people in this nation. So I just
Yeah.
thought I'd touch on that very
Right.
very simple,
Mhm. Yeah, because then if you think back to when this whole indictment against Trump started, it started with the grand jury that was convened, what, in 21 or 22 when it was convened, and it, so it started around the time of her actual Chiron return. Uh, and because that's a very lengthy process of presenting evidence, and the grand jury then has to indict. Now, mind you, you've got a black woman who's an attorney, Democrat, in a Southern Republican state, white Republican state.
I just want to
So
show
yeah,
you how many fixed planets she has in her chart.
Mhm.
So if you're missing Earth, you import it through, you hire a staff, and that's what she has, a staff. But she has this tremendous staying power with South Node Ceres, Moon, Mars, North Node Vesta, Sedna, Sun, Mercury, and Venus, all in fixed signs.
Yeah.
No problem. People with this
Yeah.
kind of, and we didn't even touch on our other aspects. Very briefly, Sun, Mercury, Venus in Scorpio, potentially in the 8th house. My goodness, we don't know for sure. But that kind of combination is somebody that you want on your side as your superpower, because this is someone that can act as emissary, Mercury. Mercury is the emissary of the gods that can go back and forth between the ancestors, the living and the dead. She can advocate on behalf of her people for hundreds and thousands of years. It's a long vision. She doesn't care how much nonsense is going to be thrown up in the dust storm of the political media entertainment storm. She has tremendous staying power with that Scorpio, fixed, water, deep. This doesn't flabbergast her at all. This is her job, to come in and change history. It's tremendous. I'd love to hear what other people have to say. Cornelia, or I've chit-chat. I want to open the floor.
Okay. Anybody else got thoughts, questions, comments? You need to unmute, Cornelia.
You can unmute them too, Jim.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I'm
Thank you.
just fascinated with the fact that Trump's Pluto sits on her south node, totally opposite the her north node and moon. So they have battled before.
Are you saying it's at on her south node in
she's
Leo?
gonna win this time, yes.
Wild. But she's going to win this time, you say?
Well, I think so, don't you?
I think. Yeah, absolutely. I'm ready to let's get the party scheduled so we can all pass out cocktails.
Right.
get the party started.
And
And look,
I would like to see E. Jean Carroll's chart too, to see how come she defeated him. I mean, he's such a misogynist. Apparently, he's getting his comeuppance from the past.
That's great. I have a question. Can you do predictions like where this
Yes.
wonderful woman may go? Like
yes. Well,
what
yes.
what might be in her future? I mean, look at this is fabulous, but do we see what do you see in the if you can do it? I don't know.
Oh yeah, you can run cycles for her future. You can make her, project her chart forward, but just by looking at the chart, what's happening now? She's got Pluto. It's going to be conjuncting her. Okay, so everything that's in this stellium in Aquarius that has an aspect is going to be hit by Pluto. So every opposition, every sextile, every square, every trine. So she's going to have a Plutonian time
Mm,
I want to say one more thing is that
please.
on my new chart for the US, Pluto's going to be going over that moon and her north node. So I think when it does, the moon and the Pluto are conjunct the ruler of the American chart.
Mm, hmm. It's tremendous, isn't it, Cornelia?
Yeah.
And it's this time. And what someone said, E. Jean Carroll, because these issues are all tied together: ecological rights, women's rights, and minorities' rights, Asian Americans, African Americans, gay, lesbian, queer, trans community, ecological, all of these issues we're seeing now. And we're
Yes.
seeing as part of the 1960s. And we're seeing this back in all of those Pluto, Uranus, conjunction, square, opposition cycles, and then take these points like 10 Aquarius. And so that will be what will happen when Pluto reaches 10 Aquarius at her moon, because she represents the people.
Well, she also connects with the ruler of the new American chart that I've done, which sits at 9. She has a whole conjunction in Aquarius in that chart at 9, 8 and 9 Aquarius.
Right there, yeah.
Pluto, Jupiter, and Mercury.
And I forgot to say, the moon is not just the body and the emotions in the charts. It's not
the
just
people.
It's not just the people. It's the ancestry of the people, the motherland, one's matrilineal heritage, and so that ties not just to the land of the United States. That ties to her motherland in Africa.
Well, I'll give you an example of the chart that I have on America. It's a repeat of what happened what happens now is my thesis in my book is that people came to America with certain kinds of issues, which became part of our American character's collective unconscious, and all the issues that related to it were there from the beginning, and they've come up over and over and over again, but have never been resolved. But because we're going through the Pluto return in that chart, right now we're going through the same kind of things we went through during the revolution.
Yep.
So it's almost like a repeat of it. And so it looks bad, but I know it's going to get better.
Rachel and Darlene and Connie, did you have questions or ideas, or did I say anything that was too fast? Because I can speak lightning fast.
I'm kind of just taking it all in and loving the education. So thank you.
Yeah. If I explain anything too quickly, or if I'm not
I
making sense.
really liked the point of what you said of even though she has no earth signs, that all of that fixed energy kind of, I guess, substitutes or compensates for that. And yeah.
Well, that she has the staying power. Yeah, she has the staying power to make these dreams, visions, and spiritual quests, or air and fire. And she has the capacity to make these things happen. And also her placements, Jupiter conjunct Neptune in Sagittarius. It explains that. So sometimes we don't have to do things. I mean, she may change things on the physical earthly plane, and she certainly is and will, but these are the realm of law and ideas, which does trickle down eventually into land rights, being fed. Mar, you have your hand up.
So I wanted to, yeah.
Mar.
Hi.
Oh, everybody has their hand up.
I just wanted to mention that since we don't know her birth time for sure, we can't really pinpoint the location of the moon. And also Pluto is going to retrograde and won't be past 1 or 2 in Aquarius, even by the end of this year, over the next year. So, but having Pluto on your moon by transit can make you feel like you're under surveillance or very uncomfortable physically and emotionally, like somebody's watching you.
It's likely that her moon is in Aquarius because it's at 10 degrees and this is listed as a noon time. So it's more likely. Jim, can you speak to that if you're still here? He may have stepped out. for a beverage. Yeah, because basically there's this is a noon chart. So we could run the chart back to midnight or run it forward to midnight, but we'd have to take a look.
Yeah, that would be a good idea to know what the potentials of her moon location could be or might be. But
but it
we
would
don't
be-
know for sure. We're just speculating at this point because we don't have the birth time.
But if it was at midnight or 12:01 on the 27th, it would likely be in or approaching Aquarius. Isn't there like a 10-degree on either side for the day? Cornelia can answer that question since Jim stepped out. How many degrees is the how many her moon at 10 Aquarius?
Right.
This is time for a noon time.
Okay, so she'll have an Aquarius moon.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay, the moon moves maximum just over 15 degrees a day.
Maximum.
So, which is why I typically use a noon chart, because then I can just look at how fast the moon is moving on that day. And I
Yes.
know within a few degrees where it's going to be.
So
Rita?
the two of you, I think it was Cornelia and Katrina, started really talking, and I heard a few words in there, and I heard tied to the motherland, or the original ideas of the motherland, which I get chills when I think about it. And I think there's two motherlands here. I think there's the United States here, and
Yeah.
then there's a big beginning of civilization in Africa, in the roots. So it
Yeah.
seems to me that it's wonderful. It's not coincidence that an African-American woman, African and American, is the real ideas of humanity. I just got chills thinking about the idea. Yay, and
Totally.
maybe she should run for president soon.
Wow. Yeah, Cornelia.
I was going to say there's something interesting between the two of them, because Trump and her both are air and fire,
Mm.
and both of them have no earth. I think it's kind of fascinating.
Well, it makes sense because they're spiritual warriors. They're like
Right.
conceptual, massive Goliath, mythological archetypes. Look
Right.
at them. It's like David and Goliath. And
Right.
there's this phrase in American literature that we've had for 400 years that came from Africa that said, we will hit a lick with a crooked stick. We will hit a lick with a crooked stick. And we're going to see this in the chart in the lives of so many people. Martin Luther King, all of his family, Nat Turner. She's having to do the David and Goliath story. But
Yes.
you're seeing how tremendous her as David can use her power to wield simply the laws as the slingshot of justice and go for it. So in
It's
Africa,
the only area he hasn't really been able to touch except for the Supreme Court. He should be brought down by the law.
yes,
He's used the law. He's used the law in so many ways for himself.
yeah. Jim, what
Okay,
else do you have?
Anything else?
Or any thoughts on that?
I think we've. Spencer, anything?
Well, yeah, this is all very interesting to me. I'm about to set the whole thing up. I've been interested in, there's so many points of
Mhm.
different, where all these just the whole busyness of the chart. And I was wondering if there's any way we could look at a slightly less aspected with all of these very distant points, which I think are very interesting, and see where she's at in the transits right now. I keep trying to do that, and I'm about to erect her chart myself. I wanted to, but I think it's been an extraordinary academic kind of conquering here that we have brought here.
You know what, Spencer? I don't think her chart is busy at all. I think it's tremendously focused, tremendously consolidated power with those patterns. And we could look at her chart in terms of traditional astrology with 7 planets only, or with the 3 additional modern planets. But understand that this is the astrology now. This is contemporary astrology. It's changed since 1950. We've have new asteroids that are telling a story, and they're feminine asteroids, and we're telling a story of women, the African American people, justice, ancestry, lineage, her roots in Africa, and these asteroids and trans-Neptunian planets, they may seem overwhelming, but this is a complexity of weaving with 17 strands of colors of cloth and fabric and fiber. This is the new astrology. How you can do it very simply is take one asteroid and attach it at a time. Start with the 7 traditional planets, then see what they do. Add the 3 modern planets, now we have 10. Put in the nodes, that's another layer. This is what I do when I read charts and with people that understand some rudimentary astrology. Then one at a time, I bring in each asteroid play by play by play. And that's really significant because it shows you how this is really extremely relevant research. And this is if and only if you're interested in women, human rights, women's rights, and ecological rights. And that's my work. That is my department, absolutely. So I'm excited by it.
Okay, so here's Fani
Here's a
Willis's
kite.
chart.
It's fawny, like a fawn, like a deer.
Fani, I'm sorry, Fani Willis's chart with just the 10 planets. And you'll see that there's 5 fixed, 5 air, no earth. She actually has, and if you eliminate, and if you only use the 5 Ptolemaic aspects, she has an unaspected sun.
Which is interesting.
Right. So, but do you see what occurs whenever you add a few asteroids? You get all of this tremendous, all the patterns. It's tremendous. But just with this, Saturn, that's her father. That's the patriarchy. That's authority, law, systems. In Gemini, that's communication. That's Castor and Pollux, the twins. At what is that? It's hard to read. 5 degrees.
Yeah, 5 Gemini.
The air planets are still in a trine, and you have that heavy opposition to the sun, Jupiter. I
Right.
understand what you're saying, but I really also feel that we're not going to bury the old astrology this quickly.
We're
Yeah,
not trying to bury it. We're adding a more, and this is Saturn
it's a matter
opposite Jupiter.
Yeah.
We're not trying to execute old astrology. I use traditional astrology in every
But
reading.
you don't see this kind of that when they
Excuse me.
show charts in the mountain astrologer.
They're starting to.
Yeah, they're what I think is interesting here too is that what you see is what I would call either a basket or a fan chart with Saturn as the handle.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Saturn
It looks like a
opposing
kite.
Jupiter.
But it's the
Well,
kite's
you've got
really
a kite
important.
you have a possible kite formation there as well
Yeah.
with Neptune, Jupiter,
Mhm.
both opposing
Yeah.
Saturn.
And we did talk about that. I talked about that kite, that specific kite. And remember, this is this directional form of flight energy. Saturn opposing Jupiter, her father opposing the system of law to change law. She's doing the same. We talked about that. Yeah, it's there. Moon.
But couldn't you look at that as a tripod chart too?
It wouldn't because you have too much of a cluster on the one in a one section and Saturn by itself.
But that
But
makes it important.
yeah, but in some ways, yes, it would be a tripod because you've got that. But you've got all these other planets out there that aren't part of the tripod.
Right.
But one thing I would point out here is the kite as a aspect pattern can be very powerful in its fixed nature because the points that are represented are the points that coincide with Lagrange points in a 2-body orbit system. Specifically, Lagrange points are where you have an equilibrium of gravitational force between 2 bodies. And the classic example is the Sun and Jupiter, the 2 largest bodies in our solar system. And you have 3 points that exist along the oppositional line. The point that in the case of the sun and Jupiter, 1 point is like basically on the backside of the sun. 1 point is at Jupiter, and the other point is beyond Jupiter. And then you've got the points that are sextiling the smaller orbiting body, Jupiter in this case, where there is this, the gravitational forces of the two large primary bodies are balanced. And they discovered that at 60 degrees behind Jupiter and 60 degrees ahead of Jupiter, there are clusters of asteroids. And they're basically trapped in these Lagrange points. And so they orbit with Jupiter as he goes around the sun. And the only way they can get free is if some other external force acts upon them, like they get hit by another large body or something to knock them out of their orbit. Otherwise, they are trapped. They're fixed in that position. Now, the fix can be very strong and stubborn, but there's that fine line between the security of being in a fixed point and the sense of being trapped and unable to escape from it. So it's kind of in this case, if you're to look at it from the standpoint of fate and free will, there really isn't a lot of free will as far as those points are concerned.
Wouldn't you like to do a comparison of Trump's chart with hers?
At some point, yes, but I think we can save that for later when we get more in, as this whole thing starts to develop.
Right.
And we get more into the politics.
I think that would be interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So let me get back to the
She's got Saturn at Gemini, and he's got a whole Gemini stellium in the 10th house.
Yes. And you can see her moon is moving, if you look up here in the upper left corner, the travel, her moon is moving at 13.5 degrees per day at that point. And it speeds up and slows down in apparent motion as far as we're concerned. It's more a matter of appearances than reality, depending on how close or far from the Earth the moon is. So the most that the moon would be off would be 6 degrees, 45 minutes of Earth. Slightly less than 7 minutes, or slightly less than 7 degrees. So it could be maybe 3 Aquarius, or it could be 16, 17 Aquarius. But it's in that range. So at the one extreme, if she was born by like very end of the day, her moon would be close. It would be flying to a conjunction to Mars. If you move it back to earlier, then it's an even stronger trine. It's makes it even stronger trine to. Well, it actually makes the trine to Pluto.
Yep.
But if you
we're
look
looking at this at just totally traditional astrology, we drop out the modern planets entirely and look at the condition of the sun, Mercury and Venus, Venus in Mars. Drop out the modern planets. And I've been using traditional astrology to describe the conditions of those planets in those signs and those aspects.
But when you look at the transits, you still see the Uranus and her Venus right now having a terrible situation, and that you don't need a lot of things to see that very clearly.
Can you drop in the transits, Jim? Uranus is not just disaster; it's tremendous electrical power and potential.
It shocks, shakes, things that you can't anticipate. It's
wonderful.
A lot of different things.
It's wonderful. It's a great transit because it's excitement, it's change. What I'm doing right now is I'm being Uranus in Taurus as we speak. We're shaking the ground of we're shaking the ground of that needs to be torn up. Taurus is a fixed sign. So the work that's occurring, even in astrology, especially astrology, is to do this kind of radical revisionist history and people's history work, which we're seeing in the schools and universities. people having the history told that's real.
Okay,
And
so here,
go ahead, Jim.
so
You
here
got
we
a
have her
transit?
7-planet natal chart, the progressed chart in the middle, and the transits on the outside.
Oh, cool. So yeah, you could just take those 7 planets. Let's do totally medieval, pre-Renaissance astrology, Ptolemaic astrology. And there we go. If you want traditional astrology, Jupiter opposing Saturn.
Notice she's got a transiting Venus conjunct her progressed Venus.
What is this, her progression?
Yeah, the middle chart is secondary progressions.
Oh, I just see a single
We're
chart. We're not seeing
not
a
seeing
bi-wheel
the
or tri-wheel.
Oh, you're not
will.
seeing this one? Oh,
We're not seeing a
okay.
bi-wheel. You could unscreen share
Oh,
and
you're
then
still
screen
seeing the
share again.
single one. All right, let me
Try again. We just
fix
saw the
that.
single with the, and it didn't say progressed. It just said, are you
Oh.
going to show birth chart, progressed, and transit in a tri-wheel? Cool.
I'm showing a tri-wheel. There you go.
Fancy. Okay. Can you put in
See?
aspect lines?
No.
Okay. All right. So if you're going to discuss
Easy answer.
aspects, please use your
Yeah,
cursor.
I mean, yes, there is a way to do it, but okay, let me get
It's
this.
tricky.
Yeah.
Can you?
Let's see. So you have the sun. So here's your, let's see. By progression, she's got, oh, look at that. Her progressed Mercury is retrograde on my moon, natal moon. Interesting. Okay.
She's coming to
Just
talk
an
to you, Jim.
observational point. Huh?
She's coming to talk to you, Jim.
I guess so.
Yes, there's a connection right there. It's true.
Yeah. When you start looking and you start seeing these connections,
Yes. Wow.
Mars as a trans, she's going to
So
have a
what
Mars.
does that mean that her progressed Mercury is on your natal moon? What does that mean?
We're talking about her.
Yeah, but what?
Mercury is the communicator of information and knowledge from the living, from the dead to the living, and vice versa. And she's coming to talk to Jim about the people and his chart, his feelings,
Okay.
his body, his moods, his emotions, and the people over here. She's coming to talk to all of us right now.
Yeah.
Is that right, Jim? What do you think?
Yeah. Yes, that pretty well sums it up. Notice her Saturn is by progression is still retrograde.
Right. She's reviewing, going over what needs to be corrected.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, so in like what, 3 days, in less than 3 days, she'll have the sun will transit her Mars.
Transiting sun will Mars will conjunct her.
Transiting sun will, the sun will transit over her natal Mars.
Got it. There it is.
And then right now her progressed Mars is looks like it's pretty close to or transiting Neptune. If you were showing it would be on her natal or on her progressed Mars.
For those people that are new in the group, they don't know what that means. Like sun conjunct coming to conjunct her Mars. You're saying that the aspect, but people might not know the translation.
Yeah, it's a matter of by transit, when a planet transits over a natal point, it reactivates it, that natal point and any aspect that natal point is making. It just gives it an extra, it's like an energy shot.
Well, also like the sun coming to her conjunct her Mars, transiting sun, that is the powers of the gods, the force of the universes. Our little solar system is the sun. It's coming to empower Mars, her in Aquarius. Her fighter power is going to get a boost, super boost, like a supercharged. Yeah.
Yeah. And notice that she has Moon and Mars are both in Aquarius, and Aquarius is the sign of causes, of ideals. And it's that energy really feeds what she is doing as a lawyer, as a prosecutor, going after people that are breaking the law.
And she'll have all those planets transiting into Aquarius, coming to conjunct her moon and Mars.
Yeah.
The people and her fighter power. Very,
Yep.
very simply. You can do this like
Mhm.
parse and diagramming in a sentence. Noun, verb, adjective, adverb. Very simple.
Well, yeah, and again, here you see her the transiting Mercury is on her natal moon.
Exactly.
Now, we don't know exactly where the natal moon is, but we know
Yeah.
that it's either already transited, sitting on it, or it's going to be going over it soon within a matter of a few days.
Yeah, it's in that
Whether
window.
this, yeah, within that window from say 3 to 17 of Aquarius.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like probably 4 to 17 Aquarius is the window of where her moon would be.
When do
Katerina,
they, when do they
when
have
you-
her trial set up?
Well, yeah, they're still working on that. And several of the co-defendants have already copped pleas and worked out deals with her. So, the more that I think as we get closer to the trial, I think more of them will start to try to work out deals
Yeah.
to avoid going to trial. Because
By
I
the
mean,
way,
they're seeing the handwriting on the wall.
her transiting Venus. Could you circle that with your cursor, Jim?
Transiting Venus. Here we go.
Transiting Venus in Capricorn, tremendously powerful. Is it a partile, which means exact conjunction? 24 degrees Capricorn. Venus in Capricorn, that's ruled by Saturn. It responds to Saturn's transit right now. This is Cornelia. Do you find that interesting?
Yes.
Her Venus, she is in Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, is a tremendous authority that gets the job done. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez has Venus in Capricorn to bring in another superpower.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is like Fani and Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez are like two sisters on their superpowers, like Wonder Twins activate. They are like two. So this ties into Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez's chart as well. I just named it because I know hers. We could talk forever. Jim, do you want to go to your other research? We have so much.
Yeah, let's look at the King family.
Please, amazing, because it's going to tie in. Make sure you made a note of her points because it's going to tie in.
Mhm.
Okay, screen sharing stopped. Okay, just looking at all your smiling faces. Okay, good to see you all. Here we go.
It's
Back
still
to
here.
you're still here. I'm still here. Where are we? Here we go. PowerPoint flag. There we go. This is where we were. Share. Here we go. All right. Is this working? Okay, so here's Fani's plane chart, but this is her fifth harmonic chart.
Her what chart?
Which
Eh,
the fifth harmonic. Harmonics are where
oh,
you
okay.
take a chart and basically you multiply it, or it's a process of multiplying and realigning everything. What a fifth harmonic does, because it represents the quintile or 72-degree aspect, is that anything that is a quintile in the natal chart will become a conjunction in a fifth harmonic. The biquintile and biquintiles also become conjunctions, and the semi-quintile, sesquiquintile, the ones that are a half a quintile or a quintile and a half, become opposition, something like that. That's how it works out.
Mhm.
But you can see how things shift. All of a sudden, we have Juno, Jupiter, and Sedna clustered together here at 910 Virgo. You've got the moon conjunct the north node. What else is jumping out at us here? But yeah, this is a chart to show talents. And so the talent emphasis is going to be I would say moon north node, and certainly the moon representing the feminine, north node representing the future, what we're here to do, I think exemplifies what she is doing. She is empowering the feminine by demonstrating her own power. Virgo, Virgo's interesting. I mean, we tend to think of it as being analytical, critical. We talk about it as the virgin. It's actually the constellation itself was created when the goddess Astraea was placed in the heavens. And she was the last of the gods and goddesses to leave the earth. Her job was basically sitting in judgment of man. So she was one of the goddesses associated with justice, and would have in her outstretched hand, she would hold the scales of justice. And so when she was placed in the sky as the constellation Virgo, in her outstretched hand, she was holding the scales of justice, which became Libra. So it's very much associated with justice. And in her case, she had this faith in humanity, that humanity could rise above its baser instincts. And when the gods got fed up, they started leaving the earth because man was just fighting and killing each other. And she was the last to leave. So maybe yet there is chance for somebody to restore their faith in mankind. Okay, the King family. A little summary here. Martin's maternal grandfather, we're talking about Martin Luther King Jr. His maternal grandfather was pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, as an adolescent, Martin's father, King Sr., left his parents' farm and walked to Atlanta, where he obtained a high school education and then enrolled in Morehouse College to study for entry to the ministry. Now, shortly after marrying Martin's mother, who was the daughter of the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, Martin's father became the assistant pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church. And when his father-in-law died, he became the pastor, a position he held until his retirement in 1975. Martin obtained his Bachelor of Arts at Morehouse College, then attended Crozier Theological College, where he attained his Bachelor of Divinity, later earned his PhD at Boston University. Now, he's perhaps best known for his involvement in the civil rights movement of the 60s and his speech at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Now, mind you, we talk about the March on Washington, but the full title was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, August 28, 1963. And this is where millions heard what is commonly referred to as his I Have a Dream speech. Now, it should be pointed out that two things of interest. One, he had used that line before, I Have a Dream, and used it at I think in Detroit and in one other place that he spoke before this. And it wasn't part of his planned speech because he had been discouraged from talking about that. He had wanted to, but he was discouraged from doing it. But as he was going through his speech, who was it? Mahalia Jackson, I think, was in the crowd and was near him. And as he was going, and there was a place where he kind of paused, and she shouted out, "Tell him about the dream." And that's when he just went off topic and so brought in his I Have a Dream speech. His chart, when viewed with that of his father and mother, clearly show his destiny within the realm of being not just a minister, but a leader in this civil rights movement. So we don't have a birth time for him. So here's a noon chart. Born January 15th, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. Late Capricorn sun. You have the Venus, the moon in Pisces. Now, again, with a noon chart, that moon could be moving. Now, his moon was going just under 13 degrees a day, so it could be 6.5 degrees either way. At this, you could look at it as a wide conjunction. It's a separating conjunction from Venus. Or it could be much closer. He was born earlier in the day. There's Eris had just entered Aries. Let's see, we have Jupiter conjuncting Chiron in Taurus. Chiron's changing, getting ready to change directions. Born with the Mars retrograde. Let's see, Mars, Neptune, and Pluto. We had 3 planets retrograde at birth. Let's see. 25.
Jim, do you want to say what
Yes.
any of that means? Kind of give a translation, like that sun in Capricorn, or
What do you
that
mean?
what it means to be a planet in retrograde.
Well, when retrograde, their planets are generally closer to the Earth, and so that energy is stronger because they're behind the Earth. They're on the same side of the sun as the Earth is. So, from a perspective, if you go here at the middle of the chart, right here in the center of the wheel, and you say, okay, here's the Earth. The Earth is here. The sun is here. The retrograde planets are always over here, and so they're closer to the Earth. When planets are direct, they're moving around behind the sun, and so are farther from the Earth. And so when they're retrograde, they're closer to the Earth. They appear to move slower, which adds to their power. And they behave in a more they may behave in a more restrained way, but in a stronger way. Generally in line with what we consider their traditional values. But if you look down here, and I don't know how well you can see this, this little thing in the corner, and I forget what it's called, basically shows the aspects between the different points. But you'll notice here with Mercury, we go over and we go down. Mercury does not make an aspect to any of the traditional planets. Mercury doesn't make an aspect until you get, the only aspect Mercury is actually making is to the south node. Where are you, Mercury? There you are. Right here. So you can see the only thing is this quintile to the south node. 72 degrees. So if you look at the nodes from a karmic standpoint, south node representing the past and the karma we bring with us. You can think of it also as our talents, our gifts, not just the debts we bring, but also things of value, are almost like the talent we're born with, which is a quintile, or the fifth harmonic aspect. Gift of gab, the oration. The speech that he made at the March on Washington, and where I talked about this, I Have a Dream, which was, when it was first heard by millions of people around the country because it was televised and recorded for history, is considered one of if by some consider it to be the greatest speech of the 20th century, but it is considered by most to be one of the greatest speeches of the 20th century. And that shows the power of his ability to reach the people with a given message. Now, over here, we jump around a little bit. You'll see Mars, and we come over here, and I don't know how well you can see this, but notice that this is the declination, which is how far the planet is above or below the ecliptic. And Mars is in kind of its red or pinkish color. And that's because he's out of bounds, and he's out of bounds north, which means he's quite high in the sky. And if you had gone out that evening to watch Mars transit across the night sky, you would see him probably passing almost like he's directly overhead, which would rarely be the case. And what it means is that he's gone beyond the boundaries of the sun. And when a planet goes beyond the boundaries of the sun, they don't have to behave like they would when they're within the confines of the sun. It's like the dog on a leash is limited to how far it can go, what it can do. But once he's off the leash, he's free to roam and get in trouble, if the case may be. Yeah, it can be expressed as like a dog park where the dog is off the leash, or the horse is out of the barn, and now you got to go catch the horse and try to get him back in the barn. And the horse doesn't want to be caught, doesn't want to get put back in the barn and confined. So in this case, that Mars energy can act or behave in a more extreme manner, either positively or negatively. But it's going to act in a way that reinforces or supports the purpose of the person or individual being here. What is their purpose in life? Which we can, that's one of the things you can look at in an astrological chart and find is, in a sense of what is this person's purpose in life? Why are they here? What are they here supposed to be doing? And with Mars out of bounds north, he's going to support whatever that is, and almost, in Mayan case, force the individual to take that path. So when the individual is in a position to exercise what free will he may have or she may have, Mars is going to push them or direct them down the path that they're supposed to be taking, not some optional path. Let's see, Mars squaring the moon. The moon is applying to that square, and Mars is also opposing Saturn. And Mars retrograde, it's a separating opposition. It's actually a double separating because Saturn's direct and Mars is retrograde. Meaning that that energy is going to dissipate faster from that opposition. But Mars will station and go direct, and we'll have another Mars-Saturn opposition at some point in the future. Thoughts, questions? I can see your faces. I know you're still there.
Was there an opposition? Was that opposition between Mars and Saturn set off on the day he was killed?
Let's see. Let's see this. That was April of 68. Sun was right around 20. Yeah. Because the sun would have been at around 1920 Aries, and so would have been applying to a trine to the sextile to Mars and a trine to Saturn. So the sun, just by looking at the sun, thinking in terms of the sun by itself, yes, that would have been activating that opposition. I'd have to pull up the chart to see what else was going on.
Well, I'm just looking at Mars as the ruler of the 12th house too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we don't know. We don't know if that's accurate.
No, we don't know his birth time. And what I would do would possibly be, I'd do a couple of things. I would, let's see, I'd tweak it just a little bit, make it maybe a little bit earlier so that maybe Sagittarius was on the 9th house cusp. And the other option would be to make it later where you move Jupiter in Taurus into the 9th house. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, so that's something that one way of doing it without having to try to rectify the chart by looking at all the
Yeah.
events in his life that might take us there.
Well, his sun is conjunct the U.S. sun in my chart.
Yeah,
Venus
okay.
chart.
Yeah, and it's also uh, basically conjunct the Pluto in the traditional U.S. chart of July 4th,
Mhm.
1776. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Going once, going twice, moving along. Okay. So here is a bi-wheel. I got rid of some of the extra points for Martin Luther King Jr. on the inside and his father, Martin Luther King Sr. on the outside. No, we don't have birth times for either one of them. So again, it's based on a noontime for both of them. So his father, with his father's sun at 28 Cancer, if the father were born later in the day, he could have a Leo moon rather than a Cancer moon, which may be the case, considering that he was a preacher, and Martin was inspired to follow in his father's footsteps.
Mm.
But with this noontime, there's a very tight trine from the moon to his father's moon to his father's Jupiter, Martin Sr.'s moon to Jupiter. You can see they're making
Yeah.
a tight trine. Looking at the two charts and what happens because there's so many planets, his father has so many planets clustered right here. This gets skewed off a little bit, but you'll see that his father's Saturn was at 26,
Mm-hmm.
Sagittarius, and Martin's was at 25. Martin was born shortly before his father had his first Saturn return.
That's interesting.
We see that his father's Venus is conjunct Martin's sun. We come over here, we find that his father's south node is conjunct Martin's Mars, and that Martin's south node is conjunct his father's Jupiter. South node, karmic past.
Mhm.
You can read this as, they've been together before in some past life. Um, and almost like it's with Martin's destiny to follow in his father's footsteps. And because Martin, it wasn't something, Martin's ability his ability as a speaker wasn't something that he was taught and learned and developed in school through practice. It was something, I mean, he was literally born with this. It's a talent that he was born with. It's something he brought with him. Yes, he honed it through his life and by listening to his father and by going to school and practicing and speaking, but it's a talent that he had. It's a difference between somebody who spends years practicing the piano and is a good piano player, and somebody who was born with that ability and can, played the piano at 3 and could write music and, like a Mozart or somebody. The difference between good and great, perhaps, I guess is one way to look at it. Let's see, what else do we see here? 28. 28. Okay, I'm just checking time here to see how we're doing. But you can see how there is this nodal connection between Martin's nodes and I can't get my screen on. Okay,
Change it. It's all bunch of trees. It wrote,
oh, okay. Passcode 0317.
here, I already know, I already
Okay.
did all that.
Okay, hang on, folks. I'll be right back.
Sorry, I'm sorry, fine.
My wife has a big Zoom coming up and she is having a problem, so I will be right there.
Thank you.
So
Cornelia, do
somebody
you
else
want to
talk.
comment?
Do I want, do I want to comment on what?
Yeah, or do you want to continue
Oh,
or give your thoughts since you're one of the elder researchers in the group?
yeah, but I specialize in children. And not having the houses there.
Oh,
I just marveled at this family when I read about them.
When you said Marvel, in what
Well, the
specifically?
psychologist was writing a book on families,
Mm-hmm.
and he talked about Martin Luther King's family as being an example of a powerful, well-knit, understood family. That the father of Martin Luther King did not take him to places where he would get any kind of prejudice experience, for one thing. Okay. So he didn't have any particular prejudice against whites,
Interesting.
and his son followed in his footsteps and his grandfather's footsteps for that matter. So it seemed like they were all very close knit and supportive of each other. And so I believe that karmic past they had, I'm sure it was there.
Hi, back. All right. Now let's take a look at let's see, that was Martin and his father. Let's see, here's Martin and his mother. While Shazam and Isis, her Uranus is on his Saturn. Her Pallas is on his South Node. Her Chiron is on his Sun. Her South Node is on his Moon, or close to it. Notice her Pluto is on his Mars, second house. And he was born shortly after his mother had a Jupiter return. Because her Jupiter is here at 29 Aries, and his is at 1 Taurus. So just a few days after her Jupiter return. And that would have been her second Jupiter return. She was 24 when he was born. Everything's in alignment. So we see that, her nodes are lining up with, let's see what else is going on, 18. Well, his Mars basically makes a T-square to her nodes. It's Mars at 21 Gemini. Her nodes at 18 Virgo Pisces. So we got a T-square with Mars. And like I say, her Pallas Athena, the goddess, the asteroid, the warrior asteroid goddess, is on his South Node. So there's a definite South Node past life karmic connection, bringing him in to parents that are going to support him in his current life karma or life purpose.
And what do you think about the Chiron being conjunct his Sun?
There is something that I didn't realize until I started reading, and you may or may not remember, was that his mother was murdered also.
No. Wow.
And this is a few years after he was murdered, but yeah. She was at church and a man came in and, started shooting, killed her. I think he wounded the pastor. There was a couple other people that were injured, killed or wounded as well. Yeah.
Well, that would be interesting to see there.
Wow.
Why?
Because I think he was a disgruntled person.
But he was also a black man, that guy.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Let me see here. Alberta Williams. Let me find out Alberta.
I would just like to point out that Uranus at 26 Sag conjuncts his Jupiter, but also adds into all the flavor of that Mars that's in the second house. And that whole outfit squares the moon. And his father, Chiron, squared his moon. So that moon got a lot of action. And of course, that's 11th house moon.
Okay, so here's what Wiki says about Alberta King. She was shot and killed on June 30th, 1974, when she was 69 years old by Marcus Wayne Chenault, a 23-year-old black man from Ohio. Chenault's mentor, Hananiah E. Israel, a black Hebrew Israelite preacher who rejected the New Testament, castigated black civil rights activists and church leaders as being evil and deceptive, but claimed in interviews not to have advocated violence. Chenault did not draw any such distinction. He first decided to assassinate the Reverend Jesse Jackson in Chicago, but canceled the plan at the last minute. 2 weeks later, he set out for Atlanta, where he shot Alberta King with 2 handguns as she sat at the organ of the Ebenezer Baptist Church while she was playing the Lord's Prayer on the church organ. Chenault stood up and yelled, "You are serving a false god," and fired his gun at her. Said that he shot King because all Christians are my enemies, and claimed that he had decided that black ministers were a menace to black people. He said his original target had been Martin Luther King Sr., but he had decided to shoot King's wife instead because she was near him. He also killed one of the church deacons, Edward Boykin, in the attack, and wounded retired school teacher Jimmy Mitchell in the neck.
And there it is, right? Over and over
Yep.
again.
He was convicted of first-degree murder, sentenced to death. The sentence was upheld on appeal. He was later resentenced to life in prison, partially as a result of the King's family opposition to the death penalty. On August 3rd, 1995, he suffered a stroke, taken to a hospital, and died on August 19th at age 44 from his complications from his stroke. Yeah, another senseless tragedy.
So a question I have, and obviously we're not going to answer, is that from a psychological point of view, because I study it from a psychological point of view, and family of origin, what's going on, and then a lot of you follow it from an astrological. I'm not sure of my question. I'm not sure of my question here, but it is interesting to bring them together, like what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you were talking about Martin Luther King Jr. and how his family, and I guess I'm like reading about Michelle. I've read about Michelle Obama, and it's like here you have an African-American woman raised in South Chicago, and how does she get to be so balanced, so lovely, and I go read about her parents, she was totally supported by her parents, you know, versus like somebody like Trump, whose father was, you know, created the monster Trump. So just interesting psychologically. I guess if we put charts up, we could see correlations.
Well, looking here, let's this father. Here we go. I mean, it's obvious from comparing the charts of Martin Luther King Jr. with that of his father and his mother that they both supported him.
Right, right.
So they gave him that strong foundation.
Absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
And in fact, his mother's father was also a preacher and had been the lead minister at that Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta that Martin's father then took over.
So how ironic that another minister in Chicago should preach killing these other ministers.
Yes. But again, he was an extremist.
Well, yeah, he's crazy.
Yeah. Almost, to me, it almost sounded like he was at a cult going there.
Exactly. It was a cult. By the definition of a cult.
Yeah. I mean, when you start looking into the psychology, you have to go a little deep. You end up going a little deeper into the psyche of the individuals. Let's see who's next. So here's Martin and his wife, Coretta Scott King. So she was a little bit older than him. But again, what do we see here? Here's her south node on his Saturn. Her moon is over here between his Venus and moon. So one way or the other, it's either conjunct both, or her moon is going to be conjunct Venus or conjunct his moon. So, I mean, either way, there's that very definite feminine power element going on between the two of them. Both Pisces moons. Her Jupiter's at 23 Pisces, so his moon, if he's born even a little bit earlier in the day or later in the day, is going to be conjunct her Jupiter. You'll see that the Uranus is conjunct, but that's simply because there's not that big a difference in their ages. Her Chiron is on his Jupiter. Her Sun is on his Chiron.
What does that mean? They both have Chiron right there. What does that mean?
That there's a strong chironic element. Chiron, and this is here. It's not about the wounded. Yes, there's the element of the wounded healer in that they're dealing with these generational ancestral wounds that were inflicted upon the blacks when they were brought here from Africa as slaves. But also helping them to heal, trying to heal those wounds through the civil rights movement, but also as a teacher. Because Chiron was he was either a student or a teacher throughout his life. It wasn't like he was a doctor doctoring to people, healing them physically. He taught medicine to man. He gave medicine to mankind, basically, teaching was it Asclepius, the medicine? But then also, in the end, what happens? How does Chiron die? Well, Chiron doesn't really die. He's wounded. He can't die because he's immortal from his father. But he sees okay. Who was the guy chained to the rock? Gave fire to the man.
Prometheus, right?
Yeah, Prometheus.
Oh, Prometheus.
Yeah, Prometheus, because he stole fire from the gods and gave it to mankind, was punished by being chained to this rock with his eyes and or liver pecked out each day by sea eagles or vultures, and then they would grow back in every night, and they get pecked out again the next day. So Chiron was suffering and saw Prometheus was suffering and offered Jupiter to take Prometheus's place on the rock. And the gods were so moved that they released Prometheus from his punishment. And rather than chaining Chiron to the rock, they placed him in the heavens as a constellation. And depending upon which story you follow, it either be the constellation Centaur or the constellation Sagittarius.
Mm.
Take your pick thing. So we find him at the end a matter of self-sacrifice, which is very much Martin Luther King's story. I mean, yeah, he
Oh,
knew
right. Yes, yes.
he knew that he was that he was placing his life in danger. He knew people wanted to kill him, but he had this mission in life, this purpose. And in many ways, his death, became something of a rallying cry and a reinforcement for the need to continue on, carry his message forward, which his wife and son and daughters have done.
Mhm.
I have a question. I don't know if it's relevant to his chart. But Katerina, when you were talking about Mercury
Yeah.
being the communicator from the dead or the ancestors, so where would you see that in a chart, or where, like, how would you look at the house? Would you look at the?
Okay, so Mercury, or is otherwise known as Hermes in Greco-Roman
Mhm.
pantheon, and Oya and the West African tradition, which we didn't even touch on, which we could translate all of these mythologies through Ogun as Mars and Oshun as Venus. But Mercury is this emissary god that is one of the only gods that has the ability he's a trickster, a shapeshifter. And so you have to be a shapeshifter to outwit death and evade capture. I always look at the condition of Mercury. So say, for example, inner wheel, Martin Luther Jr., Mercury in Aquarius. Aquarius is ruled traditionally by Saturn. We're looking at the condition of Mercury. Aquarius, again, it's the symbol of the working people. In
Mhm.
traditional astrology, I'm not using modern. I don't use modern rulership. It's not, this research is too new. But we're looking at this, Saturn works for the people. So there's a direct conduit, Mercury with Saturn. Mercury speaking to the people.
Mhm. Yeah.
That very simply, like if you look at this very, very simply, speaking to the people on behalf of being the authority. In traditional astrology, Saturn rules Capricorn first, but represents hierarchical systems. And it can be good and bad, but it also rules Aquarius, the heart of winter, where the working people have to work the hardest. And he's directly speaking to those people that have to work the hardest.
I have to
Okay.
go, and this has been very interesting. I want to leave with one comment, other than that the Super Bowl is going to start soon. Liz Green has a new book out, which I recently purchased, and her handling of Chiron is so fascinating, and she goes back through all of these different Greek myths and brings up the topic of that. Chiron was actually named by an astronomer, and she discusses this. And I just like to say that's really something that I could really recommend to anyone. It's been a very stimulating day, and I appreciated the depth that we went into with the, I forget how you, Fanny Tiffer, is that right? Anyway, Willis, fantastic. I thought that was really extraordinary, and I learned a lot. And other than that, I would say, go Chiefs! And I'm going to go see this huge game. It's a cultural event. So bye-bye. I enjoyed everything. You guys are a great group. Every one of you is a professional person and has all this incredible insight to give everybody. I've certainly learned a lot. So I'm going to sign out now and Have a good rest of your day and cheerfully.
have
Have
Okay.
fun.
have fun
Have
and
fun
enjoy the
watching your
game.
Super Bowl. Yeah,
Yeah.
bye-bye, Spencer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you see
Okay.
Taylor, tell her I said hi.
Yeah.
I'll be looking for her, believe me. Okay. Bye
She'll be
bye.
easy enough to spot. She'll be on all the jumbotrons.
You guys
That's
are
true.
great. Love you guys. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
I wanted to say something. He's talking about Liz Green. I wish I could understand her astrology as well as I do, because Liz Green is a Jungian like myself, and she was just born a few hours before me in New Jersey, and I'm born in Queens. So we kind of have a connection there. Most people think she's
Twins
British,
from
but
different mothers, right?
yeah, kind of like you and I here. Yeah, that
Yeah.
whole little
Uh,
quadrant. Yeah, maybe someday we should do something on those. There's a number of us all born in 1946, the first of the baby boomers. We've got Trump, we've got one of the Clintons, we have
yeah, Bill Clinton. You got younger Bush,
yeah, it's
George
interesting
Bush,
because we were like,
Sylvester. Yeah, you got Sylvester Stallone.
yeah,
Man, we're
and
in good company,
I remember
with one exception.
the president of my college, yeah, true. The president of my college was saying, wow, those students that came in 1964, which would have been our first year of college, he said, well, they just carried that power. I just make a comment like, well, our fathers were fighting the war for 4 years, saving up all that good sperm, and came home and gave it to us, And there we were in 1946.
There you go. Except my
There
father
you
was a
go.
farmer on the
Anyway,
field.
just a thought about the 46ers, the baby boomers,
Mhm.
for a future
Uh,
topic.
Yeah, and one added comment I'll make about Chiron, which
Mm,
some newbies may not know, and some people that have been around a while may not realize, and they don't think about it, is the family lineage. Okay. Within the Greek pantheon of the gods, Gaia came first, and Gaia gave birth to Uranus, and then copulated with Uranus and birthed the other gods. So one of them was Saturn. Saturn is the son of Uranus. Chiron is the son of Saturn. Where does Chiron orbit? Chiron orbits between Saturn and Uranus. So one of the not often discussed key elements, I think, of your Chiron is family dynamic and the trying to serve as the messenger or reconcile problems, issues within families and within generations,
mm.
as he goes between his father and his grandfather. Because I mean, what happened, of course, was in the end, Saturn did. Uranus wasn't a great dad. He tended to try to kill off his kids or eat them because he didn't want them replacing him, and so Gaia tricked him and saved Saturn, and then Saturn basically ambushed Uranus when he was perhaps a little under the under the grape, shall we say, and whacked off his private parts, threw him into the ocean, and in one story then came forth Venus, Aphrodite.
The myths are sure graphic.
Yeah. So needless to say, there's some bad blood between Saturn and Uranus
Mm.
within the family. Okay, let's see. Here we go. So now here is Martin Luther King Jr. and Martin Luther King III. Now notice the third. Look at that cluster in Scorpio. And again, now with him, we do have a birth time, 7 p.m. It's not a double A, I got my birth certificate in hand, but it's somewhat reliable. So we know that the moon is in Scorpio, however the day shaped out, whether we're way off or not. But he has the moon, the north node, Neptune, Sun, Mercury conjunction, and in fact, Mercury is Cazimi. Cazimi is when a planet is within 17 minutes of arc of the sun, meaning that it is basically the sun in as a orb in the sky is approximately 34 minutes of arc in diameter on average. Some, when it's closer, it's maybe a little more, and when it's farther away, it's a little bit less. And so that anytime a planet is within 17 minutes of arc of the sun, that it's considered Cazimi, whether it's actually transiting across the face of the sun, which only Mercury and Venus do, or just at that same degree of the zodiac. And that's when that planet is suddenly enhanced, stronger. It's much stronger. The analogy I sometimes use, and that probably kind of dates me, but I remember these old cartoons were about the dogs, a group of, a pack of wild dogs, dogs roaming the neighborhood. Okay, they're not. And there's the little Chihuahua, always just barking and speaking and looking for trouble, kind of out in front. And of course, says something, and another pack of dogs comes up and confronts him, and then all of a sudden the sun, in the guise of perhaps a Great Dane or a big bulldog, shows up behind little Chihuahua, and all the other guys run away. Scares them all off. So that, the idea is that no matter how small you are, if you have the sun at your back, you are more powerful. And that was, the classic Hollywood guys of the gunfighters. If you're going to have a gunfight, you want to do it. You want to do it either in the morning with the sun at your back, or in the evening with the sun at your back, so that your opponent is always looking into the sun, making it more difficult. If you're going to do it at noon, then you don't have that advantage. So as long as you got the sun at your back, you're stronger. And Martin Luther King III scenario, he is much stronger, because we're only looking at a 4-minute difference. 0 Scorpio 17 to 0 Scorpio 21. Oh, don't do that. Stop that. Stop that. Silly rabbi. Okay, here we go. Oh, that's why I can't do it. Never mind. I was trying to do something I can't. Okay. And I realized I can't. Okay, so there we go. 1, 2, 3, 4 planets in Scorpio. Mars, Jupiter conjunction in Libra. Venus, Saturn conjunction in Sagittarius. Let's see. So how are we comparing with Martin? Well, his son's Pluto is conjunct his Neptune. And his son's Chiron is conjunct his Mercury. Well, we've been talking about Chiron and Mercury a lot today, haven't we?
Yes.
And his son's Pallas Athena is conjunct Martin's Jupiter. Now, when we look, let's see.
And I was going to say too, real quick, like all the connections. Fani Willis, many planets, stellium in Scorpio, strong Chiron aspects. They are related family. All of these people.
Right, and Martin's Mercury is making a T-square to Trey's nodes, to his son's nodes. 19. We have, let's see, Trey. It's easier to say, rather than just saying Martin Luther King Jr. or Martin Luther King III, I'm going to call him Trey. Trey's Mars squares his dad's Pluto. 19 Libra to 17 Cancer. Um, and
Did he follow the line of the family, become a minister too?
yeah, he became a minister too. Yep. In fact, I think all of the children of Martin and Coretta um, either became ministers or I think there's a lawyer in there or two in there, and remained heavily involved in the civil rights movement. Anybody see anything else that's jumping out, biting them, want to talk about here? Let's see, 21. There must be a connection between Martin's Mars at 21 and Trey's something or other. Yeah, Mars trine Mars. Martin's Mars is at 21 Gemini. Trey's is at 19 Libra. So we have that air trine.
Mm-hmm.
You have the not only the square from Pluto to Mars, but square from Pluto to Jupiter as well. So this Mars Jupiter conjunction in Libra, it's about other people, it's about justice, doing what's right, trying to resolve issues, the differences between people. Again, it's a non-violent approach to civil rights and resolution. And it would seem that it's interesting that, you know, the people that are in the right, that have the right ideas, the right attitude, that are really pushing the right agenda, are nonviolent, where those who become violent and resist are the ones that are basically it. They don't want that change.
Well,
They
I always
feel
think it's interesting. There's that song, was it Martin? Was it Robert, Martin, and John? That one,
oh
why do the good die young?
yeah,
Like, why do the good get assassinated and the bad don't? Because it's interesting, isn't it? Because the good people won't take a gun and just kill, where the bad people will. I'm making it simplified, but you know what I mean.
yeah, but you're right. I mean, yes, the ones who, you know, the bad people are the ones who are feel threatened for whatever reason.
Good way. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, will turn to violence. Now it's interesting, as I was reading about it, the King family, um, don't believe that James Earl Ray was necessarily the assassin. They think he was a patsy. They believed that the true assassin was a Memphis police officer, and that it was basically a conspiracy, a plot to basically kill him because of his civil rights activity,
Mm-hmm.
because the powers that be, you know, wanted to keep the black people in their place.
Well, one thing about his assassination is that it made him a tremendous martyr, and
Yes.
nobody could forget that.
Yeah.
You
Well,
don't
and same
forget
thing.
things like that.
No, and the same thing is true of both John and Bobby Kennedy.
Yes.
Right.
Uh, you know, we generally think of John Kennedy as being, yeah, a great president, having done a lot of wonderful things, and the reality is, no, he didn't.
No,
I
he
mean,
didn't.
what did he do? I mean, it was Lyndon Johnson that got the Civil Rights Act passed. It was Lyndon
Right.
Johnson that got the Voting Rights Act passed. And he's a Southern Democrat. And he was able to do it only because of his long tenure in Congress that established those kind of relationships and made it possible for him to do that. And it was at that time that the dynamics of the two parties began to shift. And I think that's another aspect of the Pluto-Uranus conjunction.
Mm.
Yeah. The Republicans became Democrats and the Democrats became Republicans, if you think about it, if you realize
Mhm. Yeah.
it.
I thought that
Because
happened way back with FDR,
mm,
you
it
know, because
it kind of started.
originally when Ted, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that was the beginning of it because he was a Yankee Democrat and not a Southern Democrat, not a real Democrat.
Mhm.
Oh,
The Republicans Party founded the Party of Lincoln, and they still use that term. They still claim them to be the Party of Lincoln, though they're nothing like the Party of Lincoln.
exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, they're so far from it. I mean, think about what that party wanted to do. They wanted to free the slaves, and they did it with the Emancipation Proclamation. They wanted to establish, create that, make them equal. They should be counted equally in the census, count them equally, and treat them equally. And it was the Southern Democrats, where the strength of the Democratic Party lay, that resisted. They were
Mm.
the heart of Dixie, the Dixiecrats. Yeah, in fact, I've got a couple of charts, Thurgood Marshall and Strom Thurmond, as a classic example of that.
They sure were.
Okay, so here's
This,
so this
this
is a
is just
composite chart.
this is just trivia. I know I'm wandering today,
That's
but
wonder.
Huntington Garden and Library has a new exhibit, and it's a spool of threads by the Clark, Clark, that spool of thread Clark. How they got messages sent in the Civil War was to put a piece of paper down the middle of the spool of thread and just send it with the women's sewing stuff.
Mhm.
Clever.
Very clever. Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot of clever tricks that were used.
That's
And one of the females that helped convey messages during the Revolutionary War, um, if she had a mess, as was it normally, she would hang out the laundry on the line, and most of her petticoats were white, but she had a
who's
black
this?
one, and whenever she wanted to send a significant message, she'd put out the black petticoat.
Who is
That
this?
one of the females that was worked as
Oh,
a spy for
sure.
Washington
Okay,
during
that would make
yeah,
sense.
from the Revolutionary War.
Yep.
Okay, so
Mhm.
this chart is a composite of the King family. That
Mm.
is his paternal grandparents, his parents, his wife Coretta, and his son Martin Luther King III, and himself.
Ah,
So we've got all 7 charts composited into one.
how do you do that?
Well, you start with 2, and then you just create a composite, and then you just keep adding to that composite.
Right.
So
So you do a composite.
so you don't see them individually here? Just
This
explain.
is
Go ahead.
this is the family dynamics.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So we see oops. Yeah. Something. Okay, so we have Saturn, Moon, Mercury, and Sun in Sagittarius in the 10th, and Jupiter and Capricorn in the 10th. We have yeah. Um, now, if you recall, let's see, Martin's Saturn is at what, 25 Sag, and his father, Junior, that is, and his father, Martin Senior's Saturn was at 26 Sagittarius. We have Mercury and Sun here
Mm-hmm.
within 4 degrees of each other, the midpoint being, their Saturns. And I didn't bother, I could have done more charts where I took this chart and put it on the inside and put their individual charts around it, or vice versa. But that would have just added a whole lot of charts to some. But I think again here we see how this is playing out. There is that connection within the whole family line. Something else that shows up here is we see that the nodes line up with the ascendant descendant axis. not something that we really saw in any of the other charts, not this tight.
Mm-hmm.
And when the nodes line up with the ascendant descendant axis, one of the things is that it represents, or the individual is, it's almost as if the individual is fated to live the life that they are living, that they live.
Mm-hmm.
There's more of a fated aspect to this chart than to other charts in terms of the the question of fate and free will. They do what they have to do, or as Jung described free will, it is the ability to gladly do that which I must. And here you see it very much so. I mean, they gladly did what they had to do, which was become preachers and voices for the civil rights movement. And that was not just for Black people; it was for everybody that was, basically anybody that was in a poor, downtrodden situation. Blacks are not the only ones that are living in poverty. Blacks are not the only ones that benefited from the school lunch programs and the like. But yeah, in Congress, that new party of Lincoln seems to think that they don't deserve anything, even though that's really the base that they try to coddle to. Everything they do then in Congress tends to hurt those same people that they want to vote for them.
Yes.
And
I think also one thing you have to say about the King family was that their cohesion was their faith.
yes,
There wasn't anybody who revolted from that. I mean, there wasn't any child who said enough of this.
yeah,
It was a
nobody
very
went to the dark side.
strong, really strong cohesion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nobody went to the dark side.
Jim, I wanted to say thank you for bringing up that issue of the school lunch program, which goes back to the Black Panthers, but also goes back to the labor rights movement. You bringing in working for all of the people.
Right.
Neptune on the descendant.
Yeah.
Near the approaching the descendant. North Node approaching the descendant. That is the dream of the in the sunset, where literally where the sun sets. And also Chiron on the ascendant, and the South Node is this complex dragon that they are riding along this axis, and that it is for all people, all minorities, all women, all the dream speech. And Fani's continuing
This is
that.
the theme of civilization, right?
Yeah.
There's always the upper and the downtrodden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Doesn't matter what civilization you go to, Egyptian, Roman, Greek,
Because the March on Washington was not called the March on Washington for Civil Rights. It was the March for Jobs and Freedom. Yeah. And part of the offshoot, part of the long-term result of that comes from the minimum wage, and how the minimum wage has since then been increased and increased. And now it's at least getting to a point where it can provide for some type of meaningful existence. Companies, of course, worked around it by having more temporary people or part-time people, and so they don't have to provide them all the benefits, but they still have to pay the minimum wage at least. And so you find a lot of people that are working multiple jobs, multiple part-time jobs in order to make ends meet. But yeah, and it was there, and it benefited a lot of people.
Jim, what was the title again? The March for Jobs and
Freedom.
Freedom, bingo. Okay, so I wanted to comment real quick. All of these issues around labor rights, and I brought in Saturn and Aquarius ruler, all these planets in Aquarius, the ties to the working person in Fani's chart, and then in moving forward, many planets into Aquarius, ruled by Saturn. Aquarius is the symbol of the working, the water bearer, the working man, working woman. This ties into labor rights marches. The janitors march in Alabama in the 1960s triggered a huge labor movement. But what we're seeing is we've had a massive uptick in the past 3 years. I'm following labor, human rights all over the world with workers of the world, organizing, unionizing, rallying, protesting, striking. Garbage workers, farmers are on strike right now all over Europe. It's a massive movement. Last year, nurses, doctors, junior doctors, Amazon, UPS, all of
Yeah.
these. This is a piece of this equation of King's work, Fani's work, the labor rights movement. They marched for bread and roses. Bread.
Oh, I love that song. There's a
Yes.
song for that. Way
came out-
back, wasn't it the women who were in New York City? Didn't that come from that with the women in New York City? The sewing, they were in the sewing, and there was a fire, the factory fire, right? That's how it started.
Well, there were
Yeah.
also simultaneous to that are labor, coal miners strikes, steel workers strikes,
Sure.
factory
Sure.
Mhm.
workers in
Yeah,
your
you had the
US.
yeah, the situation with the coal miners in the West Virginia, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, where they basically lived in a company town.
Yeah.
The company
Mhm.
built the town around the mine, and that's where miners lived there.
Mhm. Mhm.
So they paid the miners, but then
And
the
am I
miners had to turn around
owe
and
my
pay them.
soul, I owe my soul to the company
Yeah, company store.
store.
The
Right.
store would always charge them
turning
more
towards
than they gave
6
them money to buy it. Mhm.
Right. Yeah, because so they had them in a
Yeah.
in a
Catch 22.
death spiral, literally, where they were always paying it back to the company. So the company, they were just making money off of them hand and foot. I mean, they weren't paying them that well to
Mhm.
mine for the work they did, and then they turned around and sold them goods. Basically, the only place you could buy stuff was at the company store, where they could charge them a little bit more for it, make a little extra profit there too, and keep them poor.
Doesn't Walmart kind of do that now? They give people discounts or whatever, but they tell them they have to spend it in the store.
Yes, and they've
Uh,
selling their
Yeah, I'm not sure how that all works with
that are
Walmart
terrible.
and their employees if they get discounts in the store. But I mean, a lot of stores provide the employee discounts for products that they buy in
But
store.
I mean, they were giving them some kind of bonus or something, but then they were telling them it might have been a Christmas bonus, but then they
Oh,
could only
okay.
spend it in the store.
Yeah, the Christmas bonus that was only, it was a Walmart gift card that they had to spend at Walmart.
Right.
What Connie's saying
Yeah.
is right, and what Rita's saying is right. This is an ancient story. The same bait and switch happened in ancient Sumeria in Babylon 6,000, 5,000, 4,000 years ago. The same with
Yeah.
all peoples. And what Connie's saying is really important about this labor issue. It's a tied to racial justice, human justice, ecological justice. These are all feminine justice. It's all
Right.
intertwined. And yes, Walmart does pay starvation wages and has the federal government subsidize so those workers get food stamps. So it is running as a slave operation. And so that's what's happening. These are all very important issues for me because in my own family tree, I grew up on an abandoned coal mine. Edge of the property was abandoned. And so
Wow.
I have followed labor rights and had multiple generations of union workers. So these issues are very strong for me.
They're
Well,
very strong for me too, Katrina.
Mhm.
My father was a labor organizer,
Mine as
which
well.
meant the mines and a lot of other places too.
I'm from Pennsylvania.
Mm.
His family came over at 14 and 16 from starvation and founded the first unions when we had none. I've been involved with labor organization even through the pandemic to get our workers' rights. And this is a tied issue, social justice, what
Right.
Connie is saying about
Yeah.
racial justice, economic justice.
Well, it goes on
Mhm.
continuously. It's like, look at, we could name it, a zillion things. It's like, you can't buy a house or even rent an apartment in LA with any of these wages.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
always the rich and rich. And when I
Mhm.
used to, I'm going to Pasadena, and every time I pass the Hilton, they'd be striking out there, and I go, yes, you go for it, guys.
Yeah.
And then it's not any different. Why did the Irish leave? Because they couldn't get the wages. Why did the coal miners in England have to leave and come to the United States? Because they
Right.
were being
Starved in Ireland.
Yeah.
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 And Scotland. Yeah.
Ireland, Scotland, England.
Mhm. Yeah, they were escaping what was left of the feudal system.
Yes.
Yes,
where
exactly.
the landed
Imperialist.
gentry, they owned all the property. And so if if you were a farmer, you were farming their land, you paid rent to them. They
There's
probably
a,
had an
there's a,
interest in the company. It was almost like a company town that you lived in
It's
since they
fascinating
owned.
that his name is King.
Hmm.
Has
Yes.
anyone mentioned that yet? Looking at the word Fani Taifa,
Mhm.
translated in Swahili, wealthy people, prosperous
Yeah.
people. Martin
Yeah.
has the
Now
name King.
it's interesting that Martin Luther King Sr. name wasn't his birth name wasn't Martin Luther King. It was, I think, Michael something, but he changed it. Um, but I think that's also appropriate because of,
Right.
it shows the commitment to his faith.
If you look at if you look at Martin Luther King Jr.'s birth certificate, you can see where they crossed out Michael and wrote in Martin,
Hmm.
Martin Luther,
Mm-hmm.
because his Martin Luther King Sr. was inspired to be a reformer by the works of, Martin Luther.
Yes.
Yes.
The interesting
So,
thing I find is that North Node is in Virgo in the sixth house, which is of the workers,
mhm. Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
were here to serve them.
Mhm. They were appealing to the masses,
And
not
Mars
to
Yeah.
in the
the
house.
1%.
Mars in the sixth house of the warrior in Virgo for daily service and work. And
Yeah.
Virgo is the harvest maiden, not a perfectionist, the
Ugh.
person that gets the work done for the safety and sanctity and continuation of the village's survival.
Mhm.
good old
Uh,
Virgos.
Thank you
yeah.
guys. I got to leave now.
Okay.
Thank you very much for a wonderful
Thank
day.
you, Cornelia.
Thanks. I
Um,
really enjoyed it.
I want to take a moment to show you my T-shirt here, my shirt.
Oh, you want to pop out of the screen share to end, Jim, so we
Oh,
can
I
see?
guess I need
Yeah,
to do that,
you
don't
need
I?
to do that because
Um,
I was going to hold up something
yeah.
small too. Go ahead. Get us out of there.
Where am I? Screen share. Let me um find it.
I
Here you
just
That way
wanted
we
to
can
say
see
one.
what's going on.
let me quick show you what else is in the slideshow and just get out of here. Okay, so here's the chart for Martin Luther King and Bayard Rustin. I don't know how many of you might have seen the movie Rustin or know about it, but Rustin was an instrumental figure in the early civil rights movement, and as such, then became a good friend of Martin Luther King. And there was a movie out about his life that I think it's probably still out right now. And Coleman Domingo, who plays Bayard Rustin in the movie, was, I think, nominated for a Globe for his performance. So here's some information about Thurgood Marshall and Strom Thurmond. I'm not going to read it. Here's Marshall's chart with his father.
Can you just
And
put that
again,
other
we
slide, Jim? Just go back to the other slide, the one you have with the reading. Okay, I'm just taking a picture of it. Thank you.
I'll send you the
Okay.
slideshow.
Okay.
Send you the PDF reader. Don't worry about it.
Okay,
You'll have
love.
it all.
Okay.
It's from, yeah, and all that's from Wikipedia. So, excuse me. Um, so Marshall's father's Mars is on Marshall's is on his North Node, and there's some other connections, but and again, we don't have birth times, so we're just kind of like winging it along. Here it is with Thurgood and his mother. Um, her Mars is on his sun. Her Saturn is on his North Node. She was a school teacher. His father was worked as a porter on the railroads and similar work in hotels and the like. Here is Marshall and Strom Thurmond. For those of you who aren't old enough to remember, which is most of you, Strom Thurmond was a Southern Dixie Democrat, hard to the core. And he ended up being the oldest. He served in the Senate until he was 100 years old.
Wow.
And He served there for 48 years, and he's still one of the longest serving senators.
Right.
And I think he still holds the record for the longest single person filibuster at like over 1 day.
Right,
Um,
right.
but as the Democratic Party became with Kennedy and Johnson and started to become more liberal, he switched and became a Republican for the 64 election and supported Barry Goldwater. Briefly ran for president as a Dixiecrat, which didn't turn out well for him. But he always said, I'm not racist. He just supports states' rights and the Southern lifestyle.
That's secret code.
That was his excuse for his racism. It
was-
is non-racism, racism. Thank you. Next month, we've got Women's History Month. We're going to talk about eclipses and intercepted signs. And Katerina had mentioned Ned Turner.
Nat Turner is a
Nat
fake
Turner. Nat Turner. Nat Turner is an interesting case.
slave who
Black
actually
slave who led
had
a
a really
short-
wonderful story of he ran the biggest slave rebellion in the United States as a slave that parallels the Palestinian uprising recently.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, but it ties into the eclipse cycle, which is very interesting. So we'll look at that. April, we have Cornelia Hansen. She's going to talk about her new book. It's going to go into it's a case of astrological research. What she has done is extensive research on a new birth chart for the United States.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
she mentioned that. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and it's going to be fascinating. So we'll leave it there. May, our normal day would be the 12th, but that's also Mother's Day. So we could meet do the Sunday before on the 5th. And my thought would be maybe we'd look, where do you find your mother in your chart? That's without worrying about, what is mom's birth date? Maybe you don't know her birth date, or maybe you don't even know who your birth mother was. There are ways to look for the mother in your chart. And for June, maybe we do the same thing with the father in the chart. And then who knows where we go from there. And then here's a little blurb on Britney Spears and her family. Britney's chart, her chart with her father, her mother, and her little sister, and they've had some conflicts lately. So for those of you who are if you're interested in that, this is very much a dysfunctional family, unlike the King family. There we go. We're done. Stop sharing.
What I was going to say about Nat Turner is I pointed out to Jim in my research that his slave rebellion actions were spurred by his visions from God, an eclipse that he took as a sign from the gods. And you can find out about his life on Wikipedia, which has some excellent research. It's Nat, N-A-T, Turner, T-U-R-N-E-R. And that would be good homework if we're going to talk about that eclipse cycle. And
yeah, I might send some information out to people so they can start looking at that. But yeah, it is interesting.
This is just minor, but we were talking about the strikes. This is a cheese I found. It's not inexpensive. It's probably, but it says it's a Welsh milk, and you see a Welsh miner on there. This is the kind of cheese that they would take on a slab of bread down to the mines. So every time I take a piece of this cheese, I just send good thoughts and a prayer to all those people in that kind of condition, past and present.
Right, and then there was the famous Welsh mine ponies.
Mine what?
Mine ponies.
Oh, ponies.
The small Welsh ponies, horses that they would use to pull the carts in the mines.
That's right, because they would have to keep them small to be able to go down the mines.
Yeah, they were small enough to get into. Yeah.
Fani, have a question? You have your hand up?
Hold on. Yeah, I just wanted to ask if anyone had ever noticed that Martin Luther King's had Mars in Libra, which made him a warrior for the people.
Your audio is out.
You
muted yourself.
Connie, you just went mute.
Connie,
there you go. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so it's like that was kind of like the two sides of his coin. On the one hand, he was a warrior for the people, but he still had these pacifist tendencies.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, Mars and Libra.
Yeah.
can be very constrained. It can explode at times, but yeah,
That
speaking from personal
And then
experience,
with
I have
the,
Mars at 16 Libra, so yeah.
he's a
and
lover,
then he
but
has the,
fighter
the moon in Pisces, which is kind of a pacifist thing.
Yes.
and a victim
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
and a victim.
Oh,
And also
I don't
Fani,
know about the victim thing.
Yeah.
he took the hit as a martyr. That's the
Yeah.
big victim you can
Hmm.
play.
Yeah.
That is the
Yeah. If you're,
shadow of Pisces.
yeah.
When
When you're looking for martyr syndrome, you can look in Pisces. Yeah.
Pisces land.
Mm.
Pisces?
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
totally.
that's interesting. That's something I hadn't considered.
Oh, it's the last and most spiritual sign of the zodiac, but it's two slippery fishes. The shadow side is the addict, martyr, victim.
Hmm.
Right.
The symbol, the two fishes, in one story represents dolphins that rescued Venus and her son Apollo from some monsters that were after them.
Whoa.
What did you say Mars in 16 Libra means?
Well, Mars in Libra, in general, he's more of a pacifist. More his energy is devoted more towards doing what's right
Oh, that would make sense.
rather than, and he's not it's not about war so much as it is about doing what's right.
Well, also it's a diplomatic
Well, but
sign.
there isn't,
Yeah.
I said he's
isn't
a
that,
lover, but he's a fighter. And so what it means is there's diplomacy, and you can
Mhm.
be incredibly effective and a tremendous fighter with a smile on your face and the wave of a pen.
Well, look at how
Yeah.
Jim does
there's
it. He
more than
does it.
one way to be a warrior. And like I said, if
I
you've
hide
got
my smile under my mustache.
if you got this, if you got, if there's more than one way to be a warrior. So I'm just saying, if he has
Yeah.
Mars and
Yes.
Libra, that's kind of makes you a fighter for the people.
Well,
Yes.
At
that's what
least
Jim
that's the
does.
way
He
I
tries to make changes.
Well,
You fight for changes in a different way. I have the same thing. I just looked at my chart. I have Mars 16 degrees Libra because Jim and I have some things right exactly the same. And mine,
Right.
I do it through psychology. I do it, helping people through psychology to be the warriors in their own lives,
Right.
Yeah.
So it's
change their
diplomatic.
lives. Jim
Diplomat.
just does it through astrology and I do it through like psychology.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Rita was born like 25 hours after I was, or something like that. So,
I've got Jim and Liz Green near my.
yeah. So triplets
I
from
used to
different mothers.
do it through surgery.
Oh, something I was going to mention because we were talking about Martin Luther King and the church and stuff. And the reason I was pointing out my T-shirt here, which is Aragon, Bolin.
We can't see it, Jim. You can turn your lens.
Oh,
of
yeah,
your
let me do it now. Here we go. There you go.
There you go.
Bolin, Seymour, Cleves, Howard, and Parr. So those are the 6 wives of Henry VIII.
Oh, wow.
Divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. But the interesting point is that, and I was curious, today, February 11th, 1531, was the day that the Ecclesiastical Assembly, known as Convocation, granted King Henry VIII the title of Singular Protector, Supreme Lord, and even so far as the law of Christ allows, supreme head of the English church and clergy.
Oh dear God, that's where it really went to shit, didn't it?
Yeah, so it's 493
Right?
years ago. Yes. Yes.
Wow.
That,
Really a disaster.
yeah.
What
The
year
Church
was
of
that?
England was 1531.
So
February 11th,
1492, 1531. It was just a
Well,
disaster.
Henry wanted a divorce from Catherine because she couldn't give him a surviving son. The Pope wouldn't give him one
The church would
because
let him do it.
so the church would let him do it. So ultimately, with some influence from the Boleyns, a lot of influence from the Boleyns, he decided to create his own church, the Church of England, with him as the head of it.
And the beginning of the global imperialist empire of England.
Yeah.
Right.
The
And
empire.
we'd already, Martin Luther had already posted his edict on the church door in Germany,
Yeah.
beginning of the the Reformation. So that had already started. And so there was already people in England who were saying, oh, that's not a bad idea. And of course, with the division of church and state, that then gave Henry the authority to basically lay claim to all of the Catholic lands that the church held in England. And that
A lot.
helped to solve his problem with any existing debts.
And also with the Protestant Reformation Church of England, the Catholic Church would never allow priests to marry. And so they could not pass on or have children or have heirs and pass on land. So all of that
Right.
land stayed in the Catholic Church. And in England, the policy was different with after that Church of England. Priests could marry, deacons could marry, they could inherit land, but only amongst men.
Yeah. Was it? No, it wasn't.
So you're
Go ahead.
wearing that
Yes.
T-shirt to make what statement?
Oh, just because it's that and the fact that my wife has a tutor executed Queen's Zoom call going on right now.
Oh, interesting. Supporting that.
Yes.
Supporting these
she's
women
been-
that all lost their lives because of some male.
Yeah. I mean,
Interesting.
and since, Catherine of Aragon was the mother of Mary, the first of England. Anne Boleyn was the mother of Elizabeth.
Mm.
So he's still looking for a son. There were powers within the court of the king that didn't like Anne, and so for the Boleyns, and so got her executed. So then he was able to marry Jane Seymour, and she gave him a son, but then died shortly after. So then he had an arranged marriage with Anne of Cleves from Germany. But yeah, for those of you who haven't seen Styx, you really ought to see it or listen to the music. It's great. But
I've heard one
yeah,
or
he
two
thought she
numbers
was kind of
from it, yeah.
ugly, so he
Yeah.
divorced Anne of Cleves and then married the young Catherine Howard. But he was 35 or so years older than her and in his downward spiral, so didn't
I
like
really
her. And she was supposedly sleeping with other people, and so he had her killed, had beheaded, and so then he ended up marrying Catherine Parr, who had already lost two husbands.
Can't wait till
Yeah,
we
he
get to
took-
Women's History Month because we really have to
Yes.
lay some groundwork about bringing back women's rights in that next
Yes.
month.
Mhm.
My
And
God.
then so he died. She remarried and then died in childbirth. So
Wow, we
the
have a
woman's
long
life was
go.
it's a long
As we-
sad story, but yes,
I really
that's an
like
idea.
that we showed a new legacy of American history through the African American legacy.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
so timely that we finally did this. I know a lot of even African American folks don't like to celebrate Black History Month because we want it all year long. And so hopefully we can bring more of the wonderful information from all peoples when we talk about the states.
Yeah,
of the
it's I mean, how many people, speaking of women in general, how many people know about Hedy Lamarr and all of the inventions that she
Yeah.
created during World War II
Yeah.
Or
so-
that helped the Allies win the war?
Johnson, Katherine Johnson.
Who is
But-
that, Dorothy?
What?
Who is
Yeah,
that?
I mean, there's
She
There's
did all
some-
the computer work that basically, was did all the work to get all the NASA work to get
Yeah.
oh right, yes,
What was that movie made about the women that,
yes,
what is
Mhm.
the name of that movie?
There's
um,
American women that did as well.
Figures.
I remember them, they made a movie out of it. They were
Yeah.
driving
It was called Figures.
Figures,
yeah,
yes.
about the women and the African American
what they're
women
like.
that were figuring out some of the space stuff, right? And they weren't.
Right, there's,
Funny.
mhm. Yeah, there's
Right.
like three African American women.
They were
I mean,
arrested at the gate
Yeah,
because they were in a
they were just
convertible or
incredible
something.
mathematicians. Yeah,
Yeah. That was great. That was
They
great.
couldn't use the same bathroom, all this stuff.
Oh, yeah, it was It was
God.
just
Mhm.
fascinating and heartbreaking to listen
Yeah.
to it. Yeah.
yeah.
She had to run. They were wondering. She had to run down to a different building to use the bathroom, and they were wondering why she wasn't there when they were trying to call her on the phone or something. And she said,
Yeah.
she was out of breath
Yeah.
because she couldn't use the bathroom.
Yes,
Dear
I know,
God.
it was ridiculous.
It's
Yeah,
a real.
but-
If you haven't
Oh.
seen it, Katrina, I think it's
Yeah, I
called Figures. Yes, that what it is.
Yeah, figures.
Katerina. Yeah. I hear you. I think that's, we have so much work to do, which is why it's so important that we're having these conversations here.
So, since we're going to be talking about next month is National Women's Month,
Oh.
if there are any ladies from current or history that you would like us to include, let me know and we'll run up some charts for them so we can talk about them.
Okay.
Well, have we
Uh,
done Michelle Obama's chart? Can we do hers?
Yeah, we could do hers.
Although I don't know that she has really made, I mean, she's an amazing human, but she's come to notoriety not through her cultural work, but as a wife of a president. So that's a wife
Yeah.
role. I really like bringing Fani Willis up.
Well,
Mhm.
that's diminishing wife's role. I mean, she's made a huge difference with her books and people that, you know,
Uh,
just having her
it's-
picture at the Library of Princeton. How many Black women have now applied to Princeton because they've seen her do it? You know, so it doesn't have to be, it can be more indirect.
in some cases they lead by example without necessarily doing. I saw something recently within the last few days on the news blurb in it, where there was some speculation that she is maybe thinking about
Somebody mentioned that.
joining in
Gossip. It's suburban gossip.
yeah, it's wishful thinking, I think, is what it is.
We need something.
Yeah,
What
we
about-
need somebody who's not, with one foot in the grave and the other one off the ground. The choice between Biden and Trump is like, well, yeah, Trump is crazier,
Mhm.
perhaps more senile. That's a toss up there, maybe. But they both are, living with one foot in the grave and the other foot in the air. So it's kind of like,
Put in the sanitarium.
I'm sorry, I'm one of them old white guys, and we have messed things up more than we have a right to. So it's time for a change. And
A
I would
Black
be more
woman,
than
I
happy
think
to
that's
vote
good.
for any qualified female candidate.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Well, thank you, ladies, for
Well,
hanging
thank you,
around.
Jim.
I wish you all a happy Valentine's Day again. Remember, there's going to be 3 first quarter crisis of action squares that morning. So, and
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day.
Yeah, go
Yep.
get your helmet and your body armor on and stay under
Yep.
the bed for sure.
Three,
Uh,
say it one more time. 3 crisis.
the first quarter squares. They're called the crisis of action squares. It's going to be the moon to, I think it's Venus, Pluto, and Mars, or
Yeah.
Mercury, Venus, and Mars, something like that.
And
Yeah.
so what
Um,
does crisis of actions actually refer to?
Yeah, what does that mean?
But
Get your
the idea
helmets?
is that it's that point when you're supposed to take some kind of you feel compelled, or the energy is optimal for taking action on something.
Oh, that's a
First
little
square.
scary.
That's
for me.
interesting energy for Valentine's Day. If we
Yeah,
like
it
tell
is.
your significant other, either make this official
Yeah.
or move on.
Yeah. So Darlene, if you'll just drop me an email, so I have your email address,
Yes.
I will send you a copy of the slideshow, so you'll have all that information.
You want me to put that in the chat or through the?
Email.
No, you just send me an actual email to my email, Jimmy_Eddie@hotmail.com. Yeah.
Okay.
Write it down. That's Jimmy, JIMMY _ I make things difficult for people. Eddie, EDDY @hotmail.com. And for those who wonder, my middle name is Edward. I'm named after my Uncle Pete.
Okay. Yeah. All right, good. I have some questions, so that's perfect.
Okay. Yes,
Okay,
and
perfect.
feel free to ask any questions.
Oh, I've got some big decisions to do on Wednesday.
Before
with,
you close and after you turn the recording off, Jim, let me touch base
Yeah,
with you.
I think it's about time to, I'm going to stop the recording.
It's
Good
So I
idea.
way
have to
past
figure out where
time.
the heck it's at.
Wait, yeah, I knew this would be more information than possible. Like we had
Yeah.
so much research. We have to have 12